Welcome to West Cork. It's Friday night. I'm Barry Chandler. You're here for Friday night's lock-in, our second lock-in from Ireland. We're in week 2, I think, of 6 weeks of lockdown in Ireland. You're all very welcome to the lock-in tonight. Let us know where you are and what's in your glass. I'm coming to you live from just outside Skibbereen in West Cork. We're going to have a great old lock-in tonight. Hope you're impressed with the fire there. I hope it's better in your mind than last week's fire, which took all kinds of magic to try and get up and going. So we have 2 great guests tonight who'll be joining us in a few minutes to talk whiskey, music, bit of crack, lockdown, all kinds of a session tonight. We've got some great whiskies. My shelves are filling up behind me with whiskies, so we're going to have a good old time tonight. But great to see so many of you joining in. A little bit earlier in Ireland tonight, 1 hour earlier. The clocks haven't changed in the United States. They change tomorrow night, Sunday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and then we'll be back 5 hours difference to the East Coast and 8 hours to the West Coast. So it's still regular time in America and 1 hour earlier for us here in Ireland. So great to see so many familiar faces. There's That's Dram Good, Omar, buddy Omar with dark silky cask strength in his glass. Good man, Omar. Buddy Kieran Quinn from New Jersey with Redbreast cask strength, 12-year-old. Good man for tonight's cabaret. You must be getting ready to sing there, Kieran, are you? Tonight we have 2 guests coming to us from either side of the Atlantic, but they have 2 things in common. That's music and Irish whiskey. Irish music and Irish whiskey, in fact. And we'll be going in a couple of minutes to both Mark McLaughlin, our friend who's up in a cottage in Donegal, and Casey Lee Ball, who'll be joining us from California. And we'll be having a good old session with the 2 lads tonight. Mark will be answering all your questions about Irish whiskey. I have a whole range of questions I'm going to get Mark to answer that were submitted by our audience. But if you have any questions about anything you've ever wanted to know about Irish whiskey, Mark's the man to ask. We're always smarter once Mark is in the room sharing his insights and knowledge on Irish whiskey. So great to see so many of you. Renee and Ron in Columbus, Ohio, Colleen in Ohio, Caroline Brannigan, Philip Crawford. Good man, Phil. Phil's on next week. Phil will be joining us with his guitar next week. Great stuff. I am just finishing off the end of a Teeling 18-year-old Madeira finish, and I'll be moving on to 3 great whiskies tonight. You'll see some of them up here on the shelf behind me. We'll be starting tonight with West Cork Bourbon Cask. Reach over to it here. This is will be our first whiskey tonight. See if the camera can focus. Probably not. And then we'll be moving on to the wonderful Bushmills 1995 Malaga Cask. Stunning whiskey, maybe the whiskey of the year for me. And then we'll be finishing with a drop of Old Reliable, Powers Gold Label. And our guests tonight will have a few different whiskies in their glasses. So we'll get to talk about lots of different whiskies tonight, not just these 3 that are up here. But if you do happen to have any of these, sure, sip along with us, and we'll have a good old session with these tonight. Michael Matthews joining us from Dublin. Good man, Michael. Greg Lematrice in Ohio. Chris Connor. Great stuff. Before we go to our guests tonight, a couple of bits of housekeeping. Every week on a Wednesday, we release a podcast episode on stories and sips, and this week was no different. We had a fantastic response this week to our guest, who was John O'Donovan, one half of the 2-brother duo who founded irishmalts.com. And Irish Malts will be familiar to many of you as an online retailer. They ship, sell whiskey, gin, many different spirits from their base in both London and Ireland, and they have built an incredible business in a very short period of time. And John is a remarkable character who has led a very interesting life before he ever got into the whiskey business, and a fascinating story and a fascinating tale of changing careers and pursuing interests and making careers out of interests, and then trying something new and trying something different. And I've always been a fan of Irish malts. I've known John since he started the business, and have always been impressed by their approach to customer service and kind of personal touch to the business. So if you do want to listen to that origin story of the business, I encourage you to go to storiesandsips.com to listen to it, or wherever you get your podcasts. So it was a great episode this week. Delighted to have John join us, and it was great to see the reaction as well. First time that John really has stepped out from behind the website to chat with anybody about the business. So we were delighted to be able to hear his side of the story and understand how Irish malts came to be. Patrick Podrick is joining us. Good man. He is over in Florida. Great to see you, Podrick. I'm not too far away from your distillery, Clonakilty Distillery. Just a half hour up the road from where I am in Skibbereen at the moment. And then one other piece of housekeeping. Our wonderful Tua glass that has been crafted to accompany the upcoming release of our own whiskey, The Story. The first glass rolled off the production lines today, and by the end of today, all of those glasses will have shipped from the factory to our base in California, ready to accompany those wonderful bottles of whiskey that are making their way across the country on a train at the moment, due to arrive into California the end of next week. And we're hoping to be able to get those organized for shipping middle to the end of November, so that those of you who've organized or who've ordered or pre-registered for a bottle of The Story and the glasses, those will be on their way to you soon. So lovely looking glass, very impressed with how it turned out, and nice to have a little glass to commemorate our first ever whiskey. I'm sure we'll have many more over the next few years, but this is the first one, and we're very happy about it. All right, so let me check the comments and see what else you're all drinking and where you're joining us from. Good evening, Dana. Good to see you. There's John O'Donovan, the man himself. We just talked about him. His ears were burning. Great listens to that podcast. Great audience listens. Maybe our top 3-day listenership in the history of Stories and Sips. Biggest numbers 3 days in a row. So good man, John. John's been sending it to all his friends in Glanmire. Everyone who went to school has been listening to the podcast as well. So I hope you're impressed with this fire I've been feeding for the last 8 hours to make sure that it wouldn't go out when I joined you tonight, because the slagging I got last week when it almost died. So I'm happy to take the heat tonight and burn on one side of my body, so you have a picturesque fire for our lock-in tonight. All right, so let's bring in our guests to join us. We will bring in Mark and Casey. Mark from joining us from Donegal, Casey joining us from California. How are we doing?
Not too bad at all now. How are you?
Very good, very good. Mark McLaughlin is the founder of Cask Strength Communications. Casey Lee Ball is, well, we don't really know what Casey Lee Ball does. We think he's a musician and we think he likes Irish whiskey, but he's going to tell us more about what he does. And my understanding is that tonight we don't just have one musician, but it turns out we have two musicians, and not just the man with all the guitars behind him. Mark, I believe you're dying to play a tune tonight for us, are you?
Well, there's been as you said to me, the gauntlet has been dropped. There's a few of us whiskey writers that reckon we can play a few tunes. Omar Fatzel included. Now we're not going to let him away out of this. But Philip Crawford, who I think is going to be on the show next week, sent me a text during the week there and said, he says, "Geez, are you not playing any tunes on Barry's show?" And I says, "No." I says, "He never asked." I said, "I'll have to up my fee." And he says, "Well, I'm playing the week after." So two texts later to Barry, and we reckon we found an old guitar lying about here somewhere. So we says we'll sort that out fairly quickly.
Well, it seems like we have no choice. You're going to play whether we want you to or not. So that's fine.
Exactly.
You're a brave man with one guitar leaning against the wall. When you look at our other guest, Casey, you found more than one guitar tonight, did you?
Just a few. This is what I like to call my sanctum, or my solar, or something fancy equally like that. And it's where I come and have a big accent wall full of guitars. But yeah, Barry, I didn't want you to sell yourself short. I know you started learning piano, so that's 3.
I mean, learning piano is a big phrase. I can follow a few chords, and that's about as far as I've got so far. No piano with me though.
And then, Mark, I can't lie. I looked through your Instagram a little bit, and I saw you doing a really beautiful cover of Yesterday. And I was like, oh, that would be wonderful too if you did that. It's a great song.
Oh, we'll see what I come out with today.
Well,
Casey, I want to ask you, Casey, let me zoom in on Casey so people can see. He's got some impressive bottles of whiskey there on his tray. So I asked my guests tonight to just bring whatever they wanted to drink tonight. They didn't have to have the same whiskeys as I had. Maybe we'd open up the range a bit for more discussion. But you've got some impressive whiskeys there. Tell us what you have.
Well, I'll start off at the farthest end here in the back. We've got the Middleton Very Rare 2018. So this one I went through pretty quickly. That 40%, you really don't even notice it when you're drinking it. You just sip it and it's gone. So I thought that was fun, and especially now that they just released the 20. It's like better just get rid of this old one. And then of course we got the Barry Crockett Legacy, which no bar's complete without. And then Bushmills 21, since I knew you guys were going to have the Causeway collection, and not quite as easy or a little bit short notice to get from Irish Malts right now. Shout out to Irish Malts. They always take care of me too. But the 21, I figured this is about as close as I can get to the Causeway collection tonight. And then really, I think the star of the show, and my only cask strength bottle that I have right now, is the Dar Gaelic Bluebell Forests. Batch number 1, tree number 5, bottle 115.
Mark, so Casey, first of all, that's an unreal selection, especially for, dare I say it, for an American whiskey drinker, because those are rare bottles. Those are not easy to come across in the United States, but you've got quite the Irish whiskey collection yourself, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, the journey started with my wife and I, and I don't want to get the tone too serious, but in the very end of 2017, I had my second kidney transplant. And after a couple of months of healing up, I said, hey, I've always wanted to go to Ireland. We've already traveled to a few places like, Mexico and Hawaii and sunny beaches and things like that. But, as I got to be perfectly honest that throughout high school and a pretty long stretch, I was that guy who was like, all about like flogging Molly and like Dropkick Murphys and like drinking like Jameson and stuff like that. So I went through the phase, I went through that Lucky Charms phase, the plastic patty thing. And then I was like, well, let's see what it's really about. Because I'd already had friends growing up in San Luis Obispo that had gone to college at Trinity. And, brothers would go and bring back bottles of patty or something like that and be like, no, this is what they really drink, or Powers or whatever it might have been at the time 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So, we went over there, and as soon as we landed, it's like they put a drink in your hand, like, you got to check this out. This is the real stuff. And
there's no immigration in Dublin Airport. They just hand you a whiskey, and if you can drink it, you can come in. That's it.
You look like you can handle yourself.
That's it. Yeah. Mark, what have you chosen off your shelves tonight? I think you're hiding away in Donegal. You probably don't have all access to all of your whiskies, but maybe you have something.
No, I don't have access to all of my whiskies, but I do have a few sample bottles and stuff here, and I tried to pick things kind of along the lines of what yourself brought along this evening, Barry. So the first thing that's in my glass is actually from one of the most recent Top Dram tastings. And I want to give the lads a shout out there, Omar and Ivor, for the Top Dram tastings, because they did one with Donegal Distillery, Sleeve League Distillers, and it was a deconstructed tasting of the Silky Irish whiskey. And I was chosen to take part, but I actually, with work commitments, wasn't able to take part. So I thought I'd break out one of the components, or two of the components tonight. But because you're having the West Cork bourbon cask, I'm having the double distilled bourbon cask component that goes into the Silky as my first one, which I just put into the glass there a few seconds ago, which is it's actually fantastic. It's really, really nice, crisp, clean, lots of apples and pears. You can guess where it comes from. Secondly, I'm actually going to join you on the 1995. So I have a tiny wee bit left in my 1995. Anybody that follows my reviews will have seen that I give it a very, very generous 9 out of 10 on malt review, which some people were saying that 9s aren't easy to come by, but the lads trust me to throw it out there. I think it's an absolutely exceptional whiskey, and I'm glad I had a wee bit to enjoy along. And then, because you're going for one of the kings of the Irish blended whiskey industry in Powers Gold Label, I thought I'd stick with the blend with you, but I'm going to go for the real king of blends as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to have a wee Black Bush after that as well. But again, it's good to be here. This is my third time on the lock-in, So I feel like a bit of a veteran now. But I'm looking forward to seeing some questions come in. Looking forward to hearing Casey play some music, and it's always good. It's a bit of crack, these shows, and I think that we're 6-7 months in now. It's fantastic, still going. Fair play, Barry.
I really appreciate you joining us, Mark. Your third time here. That'll be it. We'll cap it at 3. You've run the runway there now. There's no more runway for you. No, we're delighted to have you here. We got some great questions for you tonight, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. This is about a bit of crack. There's nothing academic about these lock-ins. There's far more educated people than me that can talk about the academics of whiskey and the technical aspects of whiskey, you included, Mark. For me, I just want to hang out with people I find interesting and fun, and we can have a bit of crack with, and hopefully others join us, and we're very lucky that each week people do. And so that's all this is all about. So I know that we've got some whiskeys tonight, want some music. I want to go back to Casey before we play a tune, and maybe Mark, we'll start with you in a little bit with a tune, because I know it's late in Ireland, you've got people in your house that need to sleep. Casey doesn't. Yeah, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. Casey, there's a question came in which you're going to be uniquely positioned to answer, which is Casey an Ernie Ball fan? Now you're going to be able to answer that a bit for us, aren't you?
That's 100% correct. There's no coincidence with the whole last name. My grandfather was Ernie Ball. He started this guitar string business almost 60 years ago. And so we're the number one. And then also in the 80s, we purchased a guitar business from Leo Fender, the guy from Fender. That's a whole long story of corporate structure and non-competes and things like that. So I won't get too deep into it. But we bought this company, Music Man, because Leo Fender had gone bankrupt with this company. And we've since then started to make all kinds of our own guitars. And we make a ton of really, really popular signature models. This one right here is for St. Vincent, the really kind of famous pop. Yeah, Annie Clark, famous, art pop kind of thing. Or like Albert Lee, if anybody knows country guitar, this is his signature. Or John Petrucci from Dream Theater is like our biggest, big guy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know
that's so cool. All I've been putting skinny top, heavy bottom Ernie Balls on my electric guitar since I was a child. It's that's crazy.
I'm gonna have to get you a display box or something. You have to we have to DM each other after this. I got to hook you up.
Brilliant.
I didn't know anything about Casey's guitar heritage except for a few lock-ins ago. Casey messaged me and he said, you've never had me on yet. And I said, what, do you play? What's the story? And 2 weeks later,
what are you again?
Yeah, he sent me an Instagram, or he sent me a video, messaged me a video of you playing, which was unbelievable. And 30 seconds after pressing play, I was messaging you saying, let's talk music, let's talk lock-ins. We got to make this happen. But I didn't know this history in the guitar business. That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. And so, I sent you a really cool, really fiery flamenco, Spanish thing, throw all the hats in the air and stomp on the ground kind of deal. Because that's just, that's what I love is like there's nothing like it. And then the great thing, too, is that nobody knows how it's supposed to sound. So if you make a mistake, you're fine.
Yeah.
Well, we're in for a good session tonight. This is going to be I'm glad we've got some good whiskeys beside us because we might not go home tonight. We might not go to bed.
I better get started too. I haven't even poured anything. I think we'll let the first choice go to Mark if that's okay. What would you like to see?
I'd say I haven't heard. I don't think I got the opportunity to try the MVR 2019. Did you say you had that there? The Very Rare 2019, was it?
It's the 2018, unfortunately.
Oh, 2018, yeah. That's what I would start off with because you've got you should probably join us on the Bushmills when we're with the Bush, and that Cask Strength Hero obviously is going to be a great one to set the night out with. So enjoy the MVR and let yourself bang away.
Brilliant. Right, so you pour your drink there, Casey. We're going to go back to Mark. So Casey's got his MVR Middleton Very Rare in his glass. I've got West Cork Bourbon cask in my glass, which is a lovely, light, sipping whiskey. And I have to give a big shout out to Brendan from West Cork Distillers. You might see a few West Cork bottles behind me on the shelf. Brendan at West Cork was afraid of his life that I'd be thirsty and I'd die of thirst down here in Skibbereen, the home of West Cork Distillers, and he very kindly sent over a few bottles to me. But I'm drinking Bourbon Cask, which is a light blended whiskey, 75% grain, 25% malt, matured exclusively in bourbon casks, 3 to 4 years. Lovely light, 40% alcohol, 80 proof. But a lovely, easy sipping whiskey and something nice and easy beside the fire. You can kind of sip on this all night. For those of you in the United States who are not familiar with West Cork Distillers, they're kind of the sleeping giant of Irish whiskey in my mind. They're behind the scenes producing unbelievable quantities and qualities of Irish whiskey. They don't talk much about it. You don't hear them saying anything. They don't market themselves a whole lot. And there's a good chance you've had a West Cork whiskey or you've had a West Cork vodka or a West Cork gin and you may not even know about it because they white label and third party provide their spirits to supermarkets and other brands around the world. So, Mark, do you have any thoughts on West Cork yourself?
To be honest, I've tried. I've tried a lot of the West Cork whiskies over the years. Can't say anything really negative about them. I think they're all good. They tend to be like with the bourbon cask or with the cask that they're playing with. They stick to that kind of very typical profile, which is really, really good. But I've heard some amazing stories about John O'Connell, some amazing stories about the setup down there, and just how original their thought processes are. When it comes to fermentation, distillation, when it comes to maturation as well. He's certainly not afraid of thinking outside of the box. He's a scientist by trade. He plays, he makes no apologies for that. And he's really pushing the boundaries of what distillates that he can produce. They've been on the go quite a while down there now. I know that they moved facilities a few years ago, and that's when people really started to think about them. But John O'Connell is certainly somebody that the Irish whiskey industry is lucky to have, as far as I'm concerned, and it's certainly someone that probably a lot of the newer distillers could learn a lot from as well. They're doing things on a different level down there. It's very, very impressive.
The story goes in Skibbereen that there isn't a family in Skibbereen that either doesn't work directly for West Cork Distillers or who hasn't worked at some point for West Cork Distillers. A remarkable story of employment and bringing business to a town. I think there's more than 100 people employed at the distillery at the moment. And it's a massive complex. They're actually about to open a new distillery in the next few weeks, right in the middle of COVID. I have a cask of whiskey actually in West Cork Distillers, a cask of pot still whiskey that I laid down last year. I've never seen it, never been to it. I'd love to go there this time, but level 5 lockdowns don't allow that to happen. But I'm very impressed by, there's a kind of a Cork grit and Cork level of we'll make something happen. And you hear all kinds of legendary stories about West Cork Distillers, about John O'Connell and the lads walking around with hammers in their back pockets, fixing stills and making stills. And if they haven't got a solution, they'll make it themselves. And I love that it's not a off-the-shelf solution here in West Cork. It's built from the ground up, which is remarkable.
Yeah.
Mark,
really impressive.
Will you play us an old tune, do you think?
Yeah, I'll give you one anyway. So we'll see how we get on.
What do you give us?
Well, sure. I'll play a kind of maybe an Irish-focused one first. Not an Irish song. Actually, probably, I think it was written by an Englishman, but popularized by Christy Moore back in the day, and it's one of the only kind of Christy Moore songs that I play. But I think it's a really nice tune. It's called The Ordinary Man, so I'll just bat it away.
Beautiful.
I'm an ordinary man, nothing special, nothing grand. I've had to work for everything I own. I never asked for a lot, I was happy with what I got. Enough to keep my family and my own. They say these times are hard, and like sending me my cards. They say there's lots of work to go around, and when the whistle blows and gates are finally closed, tonight they're gonna shut this factory down. They'll tear it down. Oh, he never missed a day, nor went on strike for higher pay. For 20 years I served them best I could. And with a handshake and a check, it seems easy to forget the loyalty to the bad times and the good. Now the owner says he's sad to see that things have got so bad. Captains of industry won't let him lose. He still drives a car and smokes his big cigar. He still takes his family on a cruise. He'll never lose. Well, it seems to me such a cruel irony. He's richer now than he ever was before. Now my check is spent and I can't afford the rent. One love for the rich, one for the poor. Every day I tried to salvage some of my pride, to find some work so I might pay my way. But everywhere I go, the answer's always no. There's no work for anyone here today. No work today. And so condemned I stand, just an ordinary man, like thousands beside in the queue. I've watched my darling wife trying to make the best of life. The Lord knows what the kids are gonna do. Now that we are faced with this human waste, the generation just decide. As long as I live, I never will forgive. You stripped me of my dignity and pride. You stripped me bare. You stripped me bare. You stripped me bare. You stripped me bare.
Now, indeed. Good man. Forget about
Fabulous.
You should be singing for a living.
Ah, well, sure.
That's right.
I love your take on that song. We all know the Christie version inside out, and 16 drinks in, we all sing it in the pub. But that's a lovely take on it.
Yeah, well, it was one of his DVDs. I think it was Live at the Point 2012. And he had, or no, like way before 2012 probably, but he had Declan Sinnott playing with him, who's an absolutely phenomenal guitar player, and they played it a lot faster than they normally would, and it was Declan Sinnott's guitar playing that actually made the performance, but Christie really belted it out, and I always thought that kind of quicker, little kind of, a little bit more rapid version of it really goes down well. And it's always been a great, anytime I've been playing in pubs in Ireland, any lock-ins I've ever been at, it's always a good one to bang out. Omar's certainly heard me play that at 3-4 o'clock in the morning. And Dick Max, or well, we were in the Celtic Whiskey Bar in Killarney before. Geez, I don't know, but I don't know if I sounded as good as I do when I'm half sober. Put it that way.
It's great pub too, because when you start belting it out, everyone sings along with you, and everyone waves their glass in the air because they all know the words. Like. Yeah.
No, good crack.
Appreciate that. Great, people loving it. Lots of claps there. Kieran Quinn, up your bio. This is Michael Matthews, Deadly. Go on. Tons of clap. Brilliance is James Norton, Phil, Steve. Everyone giving tons of props there for Mark. We'll go to Casey in a second to talk about what's in his glass and to give us a tune. But before we do that, Mark, so what are you starting to sip on now yourself? Tell us what's in the first glass again. I'm
having this component of the Silky, which is it's a double distilled malt bourbon cask component. You'll see that it's very, very light in color. It's very, very pale. Double distilled, I'm presuming it's probably Cooley.
It's got all those kind of apple and pear notes that are there. Now, I don't know what ABV this was at. Again, I said I missed that tasting, but there's clearly no distinct hit of alcohol. It's incredibly well balanced. It's got this lovely kind of banana-esque note in there, a little bit of ginger, touches of spice, but really just really good, distinct bourbon cask maturation. And I think from an Irish whiskey perspective, and maybe all whiskey perspective, say take a Scottish whiskey into consideration, or take Japanese or anything, I suppose, outside of America, the bourbon industry, because they only use their virgin oak cask. But bourbon cask maturation can be a little bit undervalued, I think, sometimes by even general whiskey consumers. They find it maybe a little bit boring, or they think it's a little bit one-dimensional. But there's one thing for certain: the Cooley Distillery has produced some of the best bourbon matured whiskey that there is out there, and it really starts to hit its maturity at that kind of 15, 16 years old, which is superb. Now, James has actually come in there and said this is Great Northern, and it's 46%. Just, really clean distillate, and fantastic. I presume it's quite young if it's Great Northern as well. It's depth and clarity that you wouldn't believe. But again, another kind of champion of the bourbon cask. I know Casey's disappeared there for a second, but the Middleton Very Rare range has always been bourbon matured. Even Middleton Barry Crockett just brings a slight element of virgin oak maturation. But the Middleton brand has been synonymous with bourbon casks, and that's something that Barry Crockett started, something that Brian Nation continued on, and something that I know Kevin O'Gorman's very passionate about as well. Really distinct, playing off those kind of vanilla custard notes, bringing out the ripe fruits, the citrus, the kind of apples, the pears, the crisp orchard fruits. It's absolutely fantastic. So I see James is coming again, 4 years old, double distilled, 46%. To be honest, I wouldn't have guessed this is 4 years old at all. I would have thought it's a little bit older, 7, 8. That's why I thought it was Cooley, because sticking your nose in it, into this glass anyway, it's got really, really distinct crisp fruits. Now, I'm a massive fan of the Silky range anyway. I love the original recipes. I recently tried the Dark Silky from the tasting pack of this. The Dark Silky is absolutely fantastic. That little hint of peat in there. But it's really exciting for me, being a Donegal man, to have a distillery. Well, they're breaking ground. James is on Twitter every day talking about his piles, which I don't think is a great topic to be talking about. But, the distilleries broke ground now in Ardra. I'm sure over the next 6 months, we're going to follow that journey very, very closely. Hopefully before the end of 21, we'll see some distillation. This is a project that I'm incredibly excited about. James is a drinks industry veteran. His wife, Moira, is absolutely superb, and a credit to the brands that they've created, and the Andulamon gin, their Asaranka vodka, and the blends that they're creating as well. But I take great pride in the fact that there's a really, really good independently bottled whiskey, really, really good, gin being made in Ireland, taking its heritage from seaweed, and that tradition that is so prominent in Donegal. I'm literally sitting 10 yards from the Atlantic Ocean here. Like, it's absolutely fantastic. But the Silky and Sleeve Lead Distillers is a brand and a project that I'm absolutely I suppose passionate about and excited about. But great that the component whiskies are great as well. But I think you might have seen these trends as well, Barry, that these young distillates coming from Great Northern Ireland seem to be exceptional,
Mark, if you keep talking about Donegal with such love and reverence, there'll be no time left for me to talk about Cork. And this is supposed to be all about me and Cork all the time, but you come in here and crash the party with talking Donegal. Great. I'm a big fan of what they're doing in Donegal, and what James and Moira are doing, and we'll share it here first. But James and Moira are out there every day taking pictures and videos of the building and the distillery. We're going to follow that journey through our Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group. So every time James and Moira are on site, every time a wall goes up, every time a glass panel goes in and a still goes in, we'll be getting pictures and videos sent to us, and we'll share them on the Irish Whiskey Fans of America group. So we'll actually follow the building of a distillery from the ground up, which is very exciting. So stay tuned for that. Yes, the Dark Silky is the whiskey that pushed me over the edge into peated whiskey. And I told James today on the phone, I said, you're now responsible for extra expense in my pocket because now I have to buy peated whiskey as well as non-peated, as if life wasn't expensive enough. But so what can you do?
Well, I think they really had a niche there. You know, peat was always a big thing in Donegal anyway, and you know they talk about, especially where I'm from in Inishowen, they talk about the Potchine Republic of Inishowen. There was over 888 illicit stills in Inishowen back in the 1800s when the raids were done. More than most counties in this little 100 kilometers squared. But much of the barley and the oats and the wheat that would have been used in the potching would have all been peated back then. And it's nice to see that kind of tradition of peat coming back in. And I know James is going to produce some peated whiskey when he gets up and running as well, which is going to be great. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, though. The Dark Silky is a really good introduction to peated whiskey for people. You know, if you jump straight into a Connemara, or if you drink Scotch and you jump straight in, my first ever peated whiskey was the Frog, and I didn't touch peated whiskey for nearly 3-4 years after that. It was just too much for me. Connemara got me into it, but like having a brand like the Dark Silky, having products like the Bill Phil range from W.D. O'Connell, these products are really going to introduce a lot more people to peated whiskey, which is great, you know.
There's a lovely sweetness to the Dark Silky, which I hadn't come across before. It was a lovely balance between the peat and the sweet, which was really nice to me. Mark, we'll come back to you in a minute for maybe another tune and a chat about some whiskey. I've got some questions for you as well. But we're going to go all the way over to California. Whereabouts again? Remind me where you are, Casey, in California.
I'm in Redlands, California right now, and that's basically smack dab in the middle of the 10 between the desert and LA. So like Inland Empire, basically.
Okay. Yeah. So you're not near the coast at the moment at all.
Nah.
No. People don't realize how big California is and how far you can be from the coast at any one time. It's not all beaches, is it?
It's strange in that there's like almost every biome in California. So it's like if you want to go snowboarding and you want to go surfing, you can do it in the same day.
You can, yeah. No, that's the great thing about it. You poured Middleton Very Rare into your glass to start your night off. That's starting from a very high perch. Many people would say it is only downhill from there. When did you first come across Middleton Very Rare, and when did you decide to invest in a bottle of such expense and magnitude?
Well, the truth is that I actually first got one for my 21st birthday, and that was 2009.
Some birthday.
And, I did not know that it would be like a $10,000 bottle of whiskey today, of course. But so I drank it, no problem, didn't think twice about it, and I thought it was fantastic, and then I think I got another one some years later, and it's just, I had known about it. And so, the trend was already established even before I had gone to Ireland.
Yeah.
Just because, another thing too is that I had actually been drinking Scotch. I started drinking Scotch when I was like 16 because my dad brought me to this food festival thing in LA. And I'm just one of those guys that's always had like a really thick beard. And I was one of those guys that actually wore a kilt to high school. Really cool, had all the ladies. And so I was walking around in this whole getup, and then there's like a Whiskeys of Scotland stand, and this guy is like, "Oh, come on up." And so it's like I had like 10 that night, something like that. And then I was like, "Oh, well, this is what like high dollar whiskey tastes like." And so I was like, "Well, I got to try the Irish one because it's like Scotch is cool, but it's not really what like it just doesn't get my imagination running."
Yeah.
And so, I just always had loved Middleton Very Rare, especially because even though they're different across all the vintages, there's still like a definite family resemblance between all of them. Like I remember a lot of what I had tasted in the 2009 when I tasted this 2018. Okay. And of course, they're all pulling from the same warehouse, so there's going to be overlap. But this one's great because
Very Rare is highly sought after in Ireland, but in the United States, on there. Here I am. Am I back?
Yes, you're
You can
back.
hear me, can you?
I got you.
Technical issues. How's that? Can you hear me? There I am, back again.
Yeah.
Middleton Very Rare is not as well known in the United States as it is obviously in Ireland. Do you know other people who've enjoyed Middleton Very Rare as well, or would you be kind of on your own with Middleton?
Believe it or not, I actually encountered ignorance about MVR today on social media. I follow a lot of
Nope.
UFC mixed martial arts accounts, and of course, we all know who is going to crop up in those.
Sound issues
That's
there.
related to Irish whiskey. But someone was saying well, blending Irish whiskey is a sin anyway, and I was like, yeah, but Middleton Very Rare is a blend, and it's great. It's one of the it's like the benchmark, and he was like, yeah, nah, that sounds like it sucks, bro. It's like, guess you're the expert, okay? Some people, you're just not going to win over.
Right.
Or casuals too.
Tell us, Casey, have you got a tune that you'd like to play for us that you feel would be appropriate for your inaugural visit to the lock-in?
I think so. I've got a real classic of the flamenco world. There you go.
Amazing.
I'm just gonna ramp it up a little bit, but
Bill Crawford recognized that as
Malaga.
mariachi. Is that El Mariachi? Is that what we're hearing as identified by Bill Crawford?
Well, if you want to hear El Mariachi. Soy un hombre muy honrado que me gusta lo mejor. A mujeres no me faltan ni el dinero ni el amor. Y teniendo a mi caballo, de hacienda me voy. Oh, sorry, I won't go too long, but I do know some mariachi songs and Spanish songs a little bit.
We should have brought our sleeping bags tonight because there's no going home. Like,
I know you're gonna have to be rolled home.
I know, seriously. That's brilliant. Thanks a million for that. Will you be going through every guitar on the wall tonight? Is that the promise?
You guys want? If we're not going to bed, then why not? We're gonna pull out every synthesizer, and we'll test every amp and every pedal.
By the end of the night, I want that wall to be empty because you've gone through every single guitar. It should be an empty wall.
I love it. Let's do it.
Mark, let's go back to you, Mark. You might be on mute there. You'll have to unmute yourself. I'm going to move on to my second drink of the night, and I wonder if you could join me, Mark, because
100%.
you've got this. So, Mark, why don't you do the honors and explain to the viewers what we have here? Because this is a very special whiskey, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's a long-awaited whiskey, I suppose. Anybody that knows kind of the story or has followed Bushmills for quite a while will know that Bushmills create absolutely fantastic whiskies. They've changed hands numerous times over the last a couple of decades, where I suppose they became part of Irish Distillers back in 1972. Diageo bought them in 2005, sold them later in 2014 to Jose Cuervo, Casa Cuervo Proximo, who are the current owners, for a massive profit actually in 2014. And since Cuervo took over, I think Diageo didn't really do much with Bushmills throughout the time that they had them in terms of releasing new whiskies. They released the 400th anniversary edition, the 1608 edition, which was fantastic. But aside from that, there wasn't really anything new to the fold. Now, they did ramp up production, almost doubled the capacity of production while they were there, laying down much more whiskey than they had ever been doing before. And left Bushmills in an incredibly positive state. But when Jose Cuervo took over, everybody expected new whiskey to come along. And it's been 6 years, and we've seen a few releases: the Steamship Collection, which was global travel retail, and the Red Bush release, which, to be honest, I don't see where it actually adds to the range at all. This 10, 16, and 21 are absolutely phenomenal malt whiskies. But one thing that a lot of people cry out for, not me in particular, but a lot of people do, is something of higher ABV, non-chill filtered, no colouring. And Bushmills have just announced in the last 2 weeks that they're going to treat us to an absolute feast of cask strength whiskies, of non-chill filters, of no added colouring, of different cask variations that we all knew Bushmills probably had, but haven't released just yet. So what they're talking about is they're talking about rare and unique barrels and lengthy finishes, essentially. So when we talk about a finish, I always say when it comes to finishing whiskey, so if we take a malt whiskey, Bushmills, for example, and it matures for 10 years in a bourbon cask, and then we finish it in a sherry barrel, I think a finish is anything up to kind of 18 months. After that, it's like, in my mind, it's a secondary maturation, because it's spending a lengthy period in there. Probably we should say 3 years, and then it's a secondary maturation. But what they've done for this Causeway collection is they've taken it a little bit further. Now, the one that we're drinking is the 1995 edition. Now, you'll see the packaging there in Barry's hand. The packaging for this is phenomenal. It's the same Bushmills bottle, but the cues that they've used in the bottle is superb. But they take component whiskies which have been matured in bourbon and Oloroso sherry butts, bourbon hogsheads and Oloroso sherry butts for, I think it's 11 years. And then they vat then Malaga casks, Malaga sweet wine casks, and they were left then for a further 14 years. So this is just under 25 years old, with a 14-year secondary matching in Malaga casks, which is just astonishing to actually hear. And then vatted together and bottled. This release was about 2,400 odd bottles. And coming in at about, I think, €395 or €400 recommended retail, which I think is just tremendous value. But the flavor is where this really, really stands out. Now, I wouldn't have guessed that it's had 14 years in Malaga cask, but that is besides the point. You throw this into a blind tasting anywhere in the world, I think this is going to really knock the socks off the best whiskies out there. I think it's absolutely fantastic. What do you think, Barry?
It took my breath away when I tried it first. I've always leaned more towards single pot still, and a particular fan of older fortified wine finish single pot stills. But then I love when I see a fortified wine matured or finished single malt. And Bushmills 21 has for a long time been my favorite Irish single malt, a lower ABV, 40%. I know a lot of people complain about it. I think it's a cracking whiskey, a stunning whiskey. This now is something out of the ordinary. I think I had 3 glasses of it before I realized, or I had told myself or acknowledged that it was cask strength. It was that easy to drink. I didn't feel that heat until three drinks in. I was almost horizontal. But Malaga to me and Marsala, I love a fortified wine contribution to whiskey, whether that's a maturation or a finish. And for those who are not familiar with Malaga, it's not widely used. Malaga casks aren't widely used in Irish whiskey. Middleton does play with them with some of the spot range of whiskies and a few others. But Malaga is a fortified wine. It's made with made from two different grapes in the city of Malaga in Spain, Pedro Jimenez and Muscatel grapes.
Yeah.
And a fortified wine is just a wine where you've added a higher proof alcohol to either stop fermentation or after fermentation, kind of preserve either the sweetness or preserve that wine. And that sweetness on top of that biscuity malt. And for that long of a maturation, it has just given an incredible nose, an incredible flavor. And the color, if I can hold the color up to the camera to show you, these are all natural colors, 100% natural. I asked them today in Bushmills, was there any colors added? And they said it's 100% color of the barrel and 100% the ABV that came out of the cask, which is 53.5%, I think. It's my whiskey of the year. It's not cheap, but it's my whiskey of the year so far.
Yeah, I to be honest, I think it's mine as well. It's just fantastic. It's definitely the best whiskey I've tried this year, Irish whiskey. It's superb. I tried it alongside the Redbreast Green Cask 28, and I don't know how certain people feel about it. I think it's a phenomenal whiskey. But I thought the depth and character of this was just superb. I think Casey's going to join us with a Bushmills 21. Bushmills 21. The thing about Bushmills 21 is I think it's one of the best whiskies in Ireland by a country mile. It's all about delicacy. You know, that 40% is perfectly suited to that whiskey.
Yeah.
It plays off the kind of richer, raisiny, kind of sultana notes that come through in Bushmills 21. But it also gives you elements of those more tropical notes. The banana is clear in there. Gives you a little bit of stone fruit. There's touches of grape. It's just really, really well put together. And the Madeira drums create that. And like Bushmills 21, it's only 27 Madeira drums a year get filled for Bushmills 21. So it's not a widely produced whiskey. It is, yes, it's several thousand bottles a year. But it's just an incredibly refined, well-balanced, delicate dram. But it's by no means delicate. It's rounded, it's robust, it's complex. There's infinite layers in it. The nose is exceptional. It's rich, it's dark, it's vibrant. But the palate is just superb.
I'd rather have one bottle of this than 5 mediocre €80 bottles, to be honest. I'd rather save my money, put my money aside. Casey, tell us about the Bushmills 21 that you're drinking there. How does that taste to you?
It's
He doesn't like
I
it.
always think of right up front, not the very beginning, but right up front, there's like a really just great sherry note to it that I think you really get from that extra couple of years. I mean, it's not in 21 the whole time, but it's, you've got an older spirit and it seems to just absorb a little bit more out of it. Because I think of Redbreast 21, which has so much of that character, which it's like, they're like, this is the note we want to hit. And so I feel like this Bushmills 21, it hits that and then it does more. And then you get the benefit of this single malt, perfumey, floral sort of thing to it, rather, as opposed to the spicier pasta.
So if you like 21-year-old, I mean, this 25-year-old is going to knock your socks off. Just shy of 25 years old. It's just the layers. You mentioned delicacy, Mark, with the 21-year-old. There's a complexity to this now. You talk about delicacy, but there's a polite complexity, if I could call it that it kind of introduces itself slowly and it builds. And like any good whiskey, you leave it open for a few minutes, you come back to it, you nose it, and it's evolved, it's grown. And every time I sip this, I mean, look, I'm a third of the way through the bottle. I only got it the day before yesterday. This will be gone by the end of the week. And we'll have to sell all of our clothes to buy another one. But it might be worth it. We don't need clothes. They're not essential, apparently.
And this 21, too, it's like the nose is almost all like biscuit, caramely, candy biscuit kind of thing. So, it's always fun when you get a different layer. You get the nose. And normally, also, I wanted to touch back a little bit since Mark was talking about Cooley and talking about their single malts, and then also talking about how bourbon casks get a little bit of a bad rap. And I was going to point out this 18-year single cask Pure Connell that I got. That's a double distilled Cooley single malt, and I was like, yeah, this fits everything he's talking about. Like, they operate really well on doing that double distilled single malt thing. And then, the bourbon, this is just one bourbon cask, but the influence is like, you wouldn't think it's just the typical vanilla tobacco leather bourbon kind of thing.
The bourbon cask, the contribution of bourbon to the Irish whiskey world is something that's curious to a lot of Americans, why Irish whiskey would be using bourbon casks. And Casey, I'm going to come back to you in a second, because there's a lot of requests for you to just let loose on a guitar. Like, people think you've held back already, and there's loads to come. So we need you to let out everything that's inside you in a second.
It's called titillation, Barry.
But Mark, I want to ask you a question. Why does Ireland use so many bourbon casks? Can you help our viewers understand kind of the history of how that came about and why it's so dominant in the Irish whiskey world?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say what my theories are gospel by any standard, but traditionally in whiskey in Ireland and in Scotland, you were generally using barrels based on whatever was readily available, put it that way. So Ireland had a lot of famous wine merchants like Mitchell and Sons based in Dublin, who the spot whiskies came from. The Elbies had massive warehouses, and claret, Bordeaux, port, sherry. Ireland was once one of the biggest consumers of sherry in the world. You had a lot of kind of rum casks. We had a lot of port towns. So Dublin has a large port, Cork did as well, as did Galway. So you were seeing lots and lots of wine barrels. But in the mid 1900s, a lot of that was kind of drying up. The Irish whiskey industry was kind of on its knees, and there wasn't much whiskey wasn't being produced. As Irish whiskey, I suppose the Renaissance began in its infancy in the 70s, in 1975 with the new Middleton Distillery they did. They started then to get their hands on, I suppose, what was readily available at that stage. Now, bourbon, as many people will know, became fully regulated in 1964. Was when the rules for bourbon were kind of finite, and the one major defining factor in bourbon, well, firstly, it has to be made of a mash bill of at least 51 in corn, but it must be matured in virgin oak barrels, so brand new casks, and casks that have never held anything in before. Oak barrels, made into staves, made into casks, generally charred in the US, and then maturing that bourbon. The one thing about bourbon, there's no real time limits in there. If you want to be straight bourbon, it has to be at least 2 years. If you want to be bottled and bond, it has to be 4. But like, you could literally roll it from one side of the distillery to the other with liquid in it and call it bourbon if you really wanted to. Right. But once they're finished with those virgin oak casks, they have no use for them. So the bourbon industry going through a boom in the 1900s meant that there was the late 1900s meant that there was an awful lot of these ex-bourbon casks that could be bought. So the Irish distilleries, the Scottish distilleries started buying them in bulk, coming over here, and they were making a great base for our spirit. Why were they making a great base? Well, white American oak, it has an incredible amount of vanillin to give a lot of flavor. The grain isn't overly tight, so the liquid can really get in there and start drawing some flavor out. Doesn't add a huge amount of color. First barrel bourbon cask will add a little bit, but at second and third, you're not getting huge amounts of color, but you're getting quite mellow flavors. You're getting those kind of vanilla, the cinnamons, the kind of clove-esque styles, but it also, with kind of the distillates that we produce over here, if you take the malt distillates especially, say from Cooley or from Bushmills or now GND, it brings out those kind of riper, more orchard fruit notes, which is fantastic. Yeah. And in pot still, you get a lot of caramelized notes, which mixes really, really well with the pot still spices. So availability was a big factor in them really becoming the dominant whiskey type. And if you go back 10, 15 years or even 20 years, bourbon casks were much cheaper than wine barrels of any type. So you'd be talking a couple of €100, 200, 300 euro for a bourbon cask, where a sherry cask, your starting price could be 600-700. So it was, nowadays, I think it's closer kind of 250 to 300 for a bourbon cask, and you're talking kind of 700-800 for a starting price for sherry casks. Wine barrels can be, depending on the quality, can be €1,000 and upwards. So cost comes into it as well. But I think the defining factor of it all really was that you were getting pleasant flavor, you were getting good interaction, and because the bourbon industry is thriving. If you set up a relationship with a certain cooperage like the Kelvin cooperage or even Brown-Forman's own cooperage, you could guarantee yourself really high quality wood as well to mature your barrels. And you'll see places like Irish Distillers, Bushmills, even Cooley, even some of the younger distilleries are now really, they're heading over to America. They're meeting with the cooperages and they're guaranteeing themselves really, really high quality casks, which in the end up is going to produce really, really good whiskey. So that's the kind of ins and outs of bourbon without giving any real facts.
Yeah, that helps us understand the origin. And the legend goes that when the bourbon rules were being written back in the 60s, that the coopers, those men would have been all men at the time, making the barrels, repairing the barrels. Yeah. They had very good representation, very good lobbying on their behalf when the rules were being written to ensure that that little line went in there, that the barrel could only be used one time. And of course, if you can only use a barrel one time, you're going to need new barrels made every time. And who would make the barrels? Oh, sure, only the coopers themselves. So it's a nice little line, a clever little addition to the legislation there that protected their own industry as well.
And just a little anecdote about the cask quality in Ireland. So back in the late 80s, when there was only two distilleries in Ireland, there was Middleton in County Cork and there was Bushmills in the north, and they were both under the Irish Distillers umbrella. Pernod Ricard came in 1988 and now had a monopoly. But at the time, they had a guy working for them called Brendan Monks. And Brendan Monks was the predecessor to Kevin O'Gorman, who is now the master distiller in Irish Distillery, but it was the master of maturation before he was master distiller, and Brendan Monks was the guy that was master of maturation before him. And in the early 90s, Brendan Monks essentially did an audit on all the casks that Irish distillers had at the time, and basically just started disgorging whiskey if the cask quality wasn't good enough, and insisting that every single barrel, and you're talking thousands and thousands of barrels, was at the right quality. He assessed every barrel himself with his team, and they assessed whether it was good enough to continue to mature Irish whiskey. So the reason why we're getting such great quality whiskies like this Bushmills 1995 is because of Brendan Monks. That's the reason why this tastes so good. He insisted on that quality. There's a few questions in there. Somebody said, what would Mark think? Kieran Quinn said, what would Mark think about this versus Redbreast 30? So I haven't tried the Redbreast 30 from the Whiskey Exchange, which was released recently. It's on my wish list, but I have tried the Dream Casks, which are, I suppose, 28 to 32, where the Dream Cask 32, I think, is one of the best whiskies that's probably been produced in Ireland. It is an out-and-out sherry bomb, and for that matter, you can't really compare it to anything that isn't an out-and-out sherry bomb. The Bushmills isn't an out-and-out sherry bomb. It's got much more kind of, I suppose, different influences in there, which is creating a very, very unique flavor. If you compare it to the Dream Cask 28, the Dream Cask 28 has this gorgeous tropical note throughout, but I feel it's just tropical and that's it. There's nothing else there. It's just tropical, and that's amazing. But again, this Bushmills it's got a lot more elements going on in there. So I think when comparing it to those high-end Redbreasts, it's easily to put it in comparison with them, as in the liquid quality is as good, if not better, than some of them. I haven't tried the Redbreast 30, so I can't speak to that. Hopefully somebody will be kind enough to send me a sample of it in the near future.
Two points on that, Mark, and I want to go to Casey then, and we'll come back to some questions, but 2 points. One, you talk about the revamping of the maturation in Middleton. What I'm really hearing there is that Cork, yet again, is taking control of matters. We'll move on from that. And then second of all, we're also hearing that, what we're seeing with that question with the Redbreast 30-year-old just released from the Whiskey Exchange, the use of fortified wine, like that's a 30-year-old all port, and I think it was 6 years in bourbon and then transferred for 24 years, I think, to port. But it's what a gift to us that we can have this 1995, 16 years in Malaga, Redbreast 30-year-old, 24 odd years is it in port pipes. Unbelievable that we're in this day and age that such gifts to us, but it's directly connected to your earlier point about Brendan Monks setting that wood management program in place in Middleton that kind of laid the groundwork for that, which is we're all the beneficiaries of that, aren't we?
Yeah, most certainly. I think somebody else asked in there what was the 2008 vintage like. To be honest, I think if you're going to spend €100 on a whiskey and you can get a bottle of that, get it. It's superb. It's just fantastic. And somebody else mentioned kind of the bourbon thing. 1964, was that when bourbon casks, like pre that, were Irish whiskies matured in bourbon casks? Absolutely not. Bourbon casks only became popular in Irish whiskey in the 80s. Before that, you're talking wine casks nearly 100% of the time. And rum casks were quite popular as well in the early 1900s, but certainly not bourbon casks until the 1980s. And very, very similar situation in Scotland. They really got into the bourbon casks in the late 70s, early 80s as well.
There's a whole episode that we'll have to do, or via the podcast or something on this. That era of rum and sherry and port, and it's something dear to my heart growing up in Cove in Cork, where the ships sailed past where I grew up, past my house in Cove up to the quays in Cork, delivering rum casks to the quays there, and being filled up with butter and all kinds of things going back to the Caribbean and different parts of the world. That's a fascinating deep dive into the history of wood in Irish whiskey, which we'll do at some point. Mark, we'll come back to you in a second. We're going to go to Casey. Casey has been warming up there. 85 of his guitars are being primed and ready for playing. Casey, I'm fascinated by so much of what's going on with this guitar wall behind you, but it seems I'm not a guitarist, but so far now you've picked up two what seem like acoustic guitars, that you've got all of these electric guitars on the wall. What's your preference when you play?
Well, I'll say this much, is that I started playing electric guitar and I was like a punk rocker kid. And it's like when I first started, all I wanted to do was learn basically like NoFX and Bad Religion and stuff like that. So it's sounds a little better on those kinds of guitars. But once I had started to go to like university, I took classical guitar courses because I was like, well, I know how to play electric and I can do all that kind of stuff. But, this is like the real challenge, classical guitar and flamenco guitar. And so I kind of really bonded to that. And the other thing is that I found a teacher at the school, and it was sort of one of those serendipitous kind of fate moments, because it's like I'm going to this class and I see this guy that just looks like a short, chubby Steven Seagal. And I'm like, who's this guy? It's like I've been playing on stage with like the monsters, the greats of electric guitar at different like trade shows, events, parties, things like that. Since we know all these people from the business, and it's like, you can't tell me anything, But then it's like I see that guy play a Malaga like I just did, but it was to the nth degree with every bit of flash and every sort of thing tacked onto it. And so that kind of started my love of that kind of stuff.
I see.
I was like, aha, electric doesn't do that to girls.
Those aha moments are, they tend to be life-changing moments, because once you see a new way or a different way, you can never unsee it again, can you?
That's exactly right. When you reach the top of the mountain, when you go to Nirvana, you can't come back down.
What about your connection then to Irish music? So you got into Irish whiskey at a remarkably young age. What about Irish music? Where did that come along the way?
Well, I have composers on both sides of my family going back just a short way. And I talked about this a little bit in the Facebook group. That's my great-great-grandfather, his name was Ernest R. Ball, and he wrote songs like When Irish Eyes Are Smiling and Mother McCree, and all these songs that were about Ireland or about Irish culture. And, I was raised with like, hey, our family comes from this place, and, we had this guy who was super famous for writing songs about it. And even though he never set foot in Ireland during his lifetime and was born in Cleveland.
Can we back up there for one second? Because I think you glossed over something there that just dawned on me. So you're saying your relative wrote When Irish Eyes Are Smiling.
Yeah.
A lock-in exclusive, folks. You're hearing it here first. I'm actually blown away by the lack of preparation I've put into this interview, that I know none of these things. Casey, that's incredible. Like what a connection to Ireland.
Well, his mother was from Ireland, and she came over. I would say, let's say this might have been the 1860s or 1870s.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there were quite a few coming over at that time. I mean, mid 1800s, everybody's coming to America, basically. So, but yeah, so I think he had written a lot of those songs for his mother, kind of thing, and they also happened to be, so much more popular because in America, so many people have Irish roots, or else there's also like some sort of sympathy thing. Like there's some deep connection that happens in like every country. Like German people love Ireland for some reason, or you go anywhere and it's like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a bit universal, I think, in that. And then also, I'm going to quote this guy named Steve Morse, a great electric guitarist, and he said that it's like, when you're playing guitar, you should try to learn something that's from like your genetic background, because it's like your body, your genes, your genetic memory already knows that stuff, but you don't know it.
Yeah.
So I felt like that was pretty cool.
That's amazing.
I'm gonna go into an Irish song then. Why not? I was gonna bump up the energy a little bit, but this is one of my favorites. I don't need the cable. Just making sure that sounds okay. I've changed my headphones. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
All right. I've had enough drinks that I can try to sing. I'm not much of a singer, but.
Woo!
By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young girl calling. Michael, they have taken you away, for you stole Trevelyan's corn, as the young might see the moon. Now the prison ship lies waiting in the bay. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the way. We had dreams and songs to sing. Now it's lonely round the fields of Athenry. By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young man call. Knocking at St. Mary when you're free. Against the famine and the crowd, I rebelled, they cut me down. Now you must raise a child with dignity. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing. We had dreams and songs to sing, and it's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. One more chorus, sorry. Oh no, that's it. There we go.
Good man. You had to get some Irish in there, which is not your native music, but an homage to Ireland nonetheless. Good man.
I didn't want to do too much of an accent or anything, We all think of the Dubliners when we hear it, but
yeah.
I wanted to modulate a little bit.
I have some great response from the audience. People loving Fields of Athenry. Lots of claps from Maureen. Maureen actually asked the question if you are in any way the same Ernie Ball of Ernie Ball Strings, which we addressed at the start. Yes, the answer is yes. This is Casey Ball of the Ernie Ball family, the Ball family.
Yep.
I have I'm going to challenge you, Casey.
Okay.
Whether it's something you pull off the wall or something, or the guitar you have in your hands, but the next tune you play, I want you to, if you were auditioning, if you were trying to blow the roof off a house and show people what you can do, I want to know what you can play, because I'm convinced you're keeping so much from us, between people writing songs in your family that are the most famous Irish songs in history. You got more in there as well on top of this talent. I know it.
That's true. Well, my wife always tells me I hold back, so you always got to have a good cheerleader, a good producer, a good partner like that to help you see what you can do. But I got something for you, I think.
Okay.
I think I got something pretty good.
We'll and I'm excited to hear what this is going to be. But before we do that, let's talk about the whiskey quickly. What did you pour for your second drink? You started with Middleton Very Rare, and have you gone on to your second one yet?
We did the Bushmills.
Oh, the Bushmills 21, yes. Oh, that's right. We missed that. Jeez, I'm 4 or 5 minutes in. I don't know where I am.
All right, I saved that one. I think let's just go to the Dargaelic. Sorry.
Oh, lovely. Very good. Dargaelic. Great stuff. While you're
I'll
pouring
really
that,
be singing.
Diarmuid O'Malley just logging in now. Apologies for the late arrival, he says. I like that people apologise when they arrive now for fear of disappointment, that I'll be upset. Good man, killing the bottle of Dargaelic.
There's 2
Good man
kills.
yourself.
2 kills.
There you go. 2 kills tonight. 2 Middleton bottles emptied so far. This is a big night.
Keep going. We're gonna kill a couple tonight.
Don't be sending me any invoices now for these empty bottles.
I'm gonna send them to Anthony and Katie.
Let me bring Mark back in. Mark jumps to attention. He knows he's on screen. So for the viewers, I can see when people aren't on screen. I can see what they're doing, and in future now I'm going to wait till somebody is the most ill prepared to be on screen and catch them in the middle of whatever they shouldn't be doing, talking to somebody else or stoking the fire. Mark, what is the third drink you're going to pour tonight?
Well, I'm going to join you. I think we're going to celebrate some of Ireland's best blends. So I'm going to go for a lovely dram of Bushmills Black Bush and its newest form there, the new labeling, its lovely split label. In Ireland this week, I'm sure you noticed that, Barry, it's in super value for $25.60 or something, which I think phenomenal value. For me, this is one of the true kings of blended whiskey. Anybody in the world that thinks that blends are something to knock this, and it's an entry level whiskey, well, just above entry level, can prove anybody wrong. When I used to work in whiskey bars, it was one of those ones where if you had the connoisseurs in that were really talking a big game and talking about, oh, I love this and I love that, and I only drink Middleton, or I only drink Redbreast 21, whatever it might be, I would generally say, listen, I'll bring you one whiskey. I says, I really think you should try it, and you can tell me all about it. And I'd bring down a Black Bush, wouldn't tell them there's a Black Bush, and they'd nose it and they'd taste it and they'd think, that's it is a phenomenal drop. And then they'd ask you what it is, and I'd say it's just a Black Bush, lads, $4.60 a measure.
It's one of those unusual whiskies. I say unusual; it's not rare, but it's the sherry contribution, the sherry cask contribution. You're getting so much of that at a low price point, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a little gem because, firstly, they use a high percentage of malt whiskey in here. So Bushmills only produce malt whiskey. They get their grain element from Middleton, and there's a couple of different grain elements that actually go into Black Bush, but there's a unique grain element which I think actually runs through pot stills and then back through column stills. And it's the same grain element that's used in the 7 components of Jameson Black Barrel, but that was created to replicate the style of grain whiskey that was being produced in the Coleraine Distillery, which is very, very close to was very, very close to Bushmills up until the 1970s when it was discontinued, and then they moved production of the grain element to. But Bushmills have this Blackbush, the malt component in there, which makes up, I think, about 60% of the blend. 80% of that malt component is matured in sherry casks. And now they actually, on the new label, I noticed that they have sherry cask reserve on the new label, just to highlight that fact that it's most certainly the sherry influence that comes in here. I'm not talking sherry bomb here. I'm talking just those kind of little dried fruit elements, a little bit of that kind of almost brandy-esque, cognac-esque, really kind of rich, deep fruit. But it's got lots of those kind of bourbon lighter notes as well. The vanilla comes through lovely. It's got a kind of butteriness like shortbread. But it's just a really, really exceptional blend. But not the only other blend. I like a lot of blends, but the blend that I drink the most, and you'll know yourself, you're either, you were a Jameson household or you're a Powers household. You might have been a Bushmills household or a Paddy household in Cork. But we most certainly were a Powers household in Donegal, and Powers Gold Label. Great. People talk about the new packaging, Barry, and I just want to say this about the new packaging. My father is 75 years of age. He drinks very, very little alcohol, but he does enjoy a whiskey. Not most nights. It's Thursday through Sunday are his drinking nights. And a big session for my dad would be maybe a can of beer or 2 cans of beer and 2 whiskeys. That'd be the max that he would drink. And he drinks a lot of his whiskey with actually flat 7-Up, or he might take a wee bit of water. But he drinks Powers, and he'll drink Jameson, he'll drink Tullamore, he'll drink Bushmills, whatever I bring home, he'll drink. But Powers Gold Label is definitely one of his favourites and one of the most consumed in our house. But I said it to him the other day. He had 2 litre bottles of the new Powers packaging. I says, "What do you think of the packaging?" "Oh, it's great. Them other tall bottles were no good at all. This just sits on the shelf rightly. Sure, it's brilliant."
There you go. That's what you want.
But it's funny, when we look at these rebrands, and we look, when I seen that rebrand at the start, to be honest, I like the bottle shape. But I don't, the way Powers, the gold label, there's no gold, not the gold label. I feel a bit of kind of like that annoys me a little bit. But like when a 75-year-old man is saying it's great, and
that's a good sign.
There's no doubt about it. It looks absolutely fantastic. There's no doubt about it.
It's a big change for a lot of people. I got a few emails during the week, and Michael, you're in the audience there. You sent me an email talking about this. This is a litre bottle that I picked up in Super Value for €25. A litre, €25 of Powers for a litre of Powers. And I have to say, the weight of this is the heaviest, weightiest, most substantial feeling bottle I've ever held in my hands. And guess what that does? It takes up more shelf space in the bar. Yeah. And when it does that, it pushes something else out. And we need Powers pushing other things out if it's going to succeed. Yeah. Otherwise, no one's going to see it. No one's going to drink it. So it's a good thing.
I want to give a quick shout out actually to my dad, because I don't know, is he watching, or he might watch this back. They're generally very good for watching anything that I'm in, but I am in Donegal. I'm about 200-300 yards away from my home house. We're doing I was in Galway there for about 6 weeks before the lockdown came here, so I'm doing my 2-week quarantine just to be safe. I don't know anybody that's had COVID. I certainly have no symptoms, but just because my father is elderly and we've a lot of more vulnerable folk around, we said we would do our quarantine. But I've 3 days left, and those 2 litres of Powers aren't going to last long when I get over there.
It's a great versatile whiskey. You can sip it, you can mix it. You can do anything you want to it. It's a versatile whiskey. You're the same household as me. I grew up in a Powers house as well, and I gotta say, whenever I pop the cork in a Powers, I stick my nose into the glass. Oh, it's hard to beat that sweet butterscotch nose. It's just for the price. But cannot beat a bottle of Powers. Powers is a brand. I don't know if any of our listeners or followers are into the kind of Powers single casks, but Powers was always traditionally the more spirit-driven of the 3 big blends, Jameson, Powers, and Paddy. More spirit-driven, more life to it, more robust. It leans very heavily on refill barrels. So you're talking 2nd and 3rd fill bourbon casks. It's giving you all that distillate character, but it's also giving you those kind of that butterscotch note, as you say there, is superb, and it's giving you those sweeter and rounder notes.
the single casks that they've released over the years, there's over 30 of them now, I think, or somewhere around 30. A lot of those are first fill bourbon barrels. And that would be much more kind of Middleton-esque rather than Powers-esque. And that was the thing that always bothered me a little bit about it. Powers is that spirit forward style, that it's those refill barrels. It's got all that kind of, not aggressiveness, but that robustness, that real rounded character. Powers Three Swallows has it. It's a superb value for money single pot still. Powers John's Lane has it in abundance, refill cask, loads and loads of flavour. Powers is a brand to be reckoned with. It's been underutilized. They're clearly putting a bit of focus on it now, and they have a tremendous global brand ambassador in Derek King. Now, unfortunately, he's bound to Irish shores at the minute. But I know the plans were to have him in the US a lot. And if he does get to the US next year, and hopefully the travel restrictions lift, that is a man. If he's in your state, he's worth going seeing. Now, he's questionable choice in socks, and his jeans are always far too tight.
No, he's never worn socks in his life. We brought Derek in. Derek came into our. We did a tasting in Ohio recently. We brought Derek came on. And we did a virtual tasting together in Ohio for the Powers range. We had a great night all together. Big fan of Powers in my house, and I can say this. And I'm going to come to you for a tune now in the minute mark. So have a think about what you're going to play next. And I know you can't play late into the night for fear of waking herself and the neighbors.
No, she's awake. It's fine.
But on that Powers point, in the US, Powers was never in our generation. Go back 200 years, and Powers was a powerhouse in the United States. In our generation, it's not been, and it kind of lost footing to Jameson, and investment went into Jameson, certainly in the Irish distillers era. But what's great to see now in America is the focus on bartenders and the focus on local suppliers. So there's lots of collaborations in America with honey producers, and they're doing great, interesting Powers highballs and Powers sours and interesting cocktails. But that bartender collaboration is really interesting, because I think they've recognized this one-to-many opportunity. If you can get a great bartender that's got a great reach and is a suggestive bartender that helps his or her customers understand drinks and suggest drinks to them, if you can get them on board behind the brand, that's a great thing for the brand. So that's what I'm excited about for Powers. We can't let Powers die. So please, will you all drink as much Powers as you can responsibly drink? I'll leave it at that. Mark, have you a guitar handy?
Yeah, I do. I hear somewhere anyway. Yeah.
All right. You get that guitar ready. Casey, we're going to be back to Casey in a minute to talk about his Dargala. Let me put him up on screen there for a second. Tucking away there. Casey, I'll come back to you in a second, and we'll talk about your Dargala, and we'll listen to your strumming. And now, here we go.
Right. All right. So am I playing? Yeah. We're going to bat it away.
You, Mark. You're the man.
So I was thinking of the lock-in, and I was like, it's a shame that we all can't meet in the pub just yet. I think on my first visit to the lock-in, I would have assumed that your next trip to Ireland, we'd definitely be meeting for a pint, and that's just not happening this time around, which is sad. But this is a song, I don't actually know who wrote it or even what the proper name for the song is. It came across my desk, I suppose, when I was very, very young on a certain TV show, which you'll all know as soon as I play it. But there's a great Irish artist, actually a guy from Belfast called Foy Vance, who played this particular version of the song on Today FM years ago, and I got hooked straight away. But you'll know it as soon as I play it. Now it's a fairly easy going one. Making your way in the world today takes everything you got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad
you came. You wanna be where you can see troubles are the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. For all those nights that you got no lights and your check is in the mail, and your little angel hung the cat out by its tail. Your third fiancé didn't show. Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name. And they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see troubles are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. You get out of bed and the coffee's dead, and your morning isn't looking bright. You left the shore of bed, he doesn't even write. Your girlfriend said she's not a girl. Be glad there's one place in the world where everybody knows your name. And they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see troubles are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Say you wanna be where you can see troubles are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Say you wanna be where you can see troubles are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
Yes, yes. Love it.
Woo!
I love it. I've not heard anybody play any version of that except the original. That's unreal.
I never heard more than the first 30 seconds.
Good TV show. Jesus,
Yeah.
Ted Danson was some man. and like when Toy Story came out, everybody recognized those voices from Cheers, you know.
There's the bar in Boston that's modeled, that's famously based on. I remember years ago when I was young, I think I was 22, 23, I was in Boston and I went to this bar that it's based on, and there's 2 levels to the bar, and I went into the street entrance into the bar, and I sat there and I ordered a drink and had some food. I thought, this doesn't look at all like Cheers, and I left there just really disappointed, and I talked to a friend later who'd been there the same day, and he said, but did you not go downstairs? Like, that's where Cheers was. I said, no, I was upstairs, and I completely missed it.
It's a good old tune, I have to say, and it's one of those ones. I think the last time I played that in front of people was on a stag do. There was 40 of us, and we were in Killybegs. There's only one place you can take 40 lads from Donegal, so we went on the stag to Killybegs, and we went for the day up to Ardra to go drinking, and we were getting the bus back from Ardra to Killybegs, and I played that in the bus, and it's one of those songs that nobody knows it, but everybody knows it. Like, everybody knows it.
Everybody knows some of it. Like, everybody knows 1 line or 2 lines.
Yeah.
Mark, that's unreal. We'll come back to you in a second. Thanks a million for that. Great response in the comments there. Unbelievable response to that. People love it. I felt like you went for it. Like you let go.
Absolutely.
You were on. You hit
well done.
Low there for a minute. Yeah. Beautiful.
No, that was really. I think you got quite some pipes. You got a voice.
Cheers, Kissy.
And you can push it out.
Yeah. And the missus told me to go easy tonight. She said, "Don't be fucking pumping them out now. Like, take it nice and easy."
No fear of that here tonight.
Yeah, I know. If you get cheers going too crazy, it's going to be like a Dodgers celebration.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I might have one more before we finish up later
oh, good
on,
man.
but sure, we'll
Good
see.
man.
All right.
All right, fair play, fair
Awesome.
play. Casey, we're
Yeah.
back to you, my friend in California. You are sipping away there. Are you enjoying the whiskey?
I really am. And, you know, I keep nosing it, I keep tasting it, and it's just like, I just got to read the bottle. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just really good. You know, I just got to, you know, I always say like tasting notes are like leading the witness, but sometimes it's just like, you know, I got to take their word for it, you know.
So tell the
it's
audience what you have there. Like you've got Dargaelic, but which Dargaelic is it? Which tree do you have? Help us understand what you're drinking.
This is Middleton. This is Dargaelic. This is the Bluebell Forest edition. This is tree number 5.
Mm.
And, you know, this has been a great bottle. This is probably one of my favorite bottles, I think, all time.
Dargaelic, of course,
Yeah.
almost, well, crudely translated as Irish oak, and it is the Middleton Distillery's venture into using Irish oak as a virgin Irish oak as a finishing cask in the maturation of their pot still whiskey to create this series Dargaelic, which can trace its roots back to, or you can trace the cask back to the tree and back to the forest. And so you've got Bluebell Forest. There's also Grinsell's Wood, and also Knockgrass Forest, are the 3 different forests, aren't there?
If you want to, you can go see where the tree was felled. You can see the stump or something, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I gotta go. I gotta go back right now. Direct flights from LAX are 226.
Well, you can bring your empty bottle is your receipt. To let you into the woods. I laid down a challenge for you earlier.
Yeah.
I said you've got something. Talk us through what's Casey letting loose on the guitar all about?
All right, so this is like one of the more recent pieces that my maestro and I have been working on. And so in the flamenco world, it's almost kind of like the martial arts world. You have competing schools and you have competing black belts going at it in different schools. I already said school, sorry. I'm going to do this thing called Punta y Tapon, which was made famous, at least in America, by this guy named Sabicas, Agustin Castellon Campos. And so he was one of these guys in Spain who fled Franco and the fascist regime in about the 30s, and then also the Romero family later on too. Right? Sabicas left later. Anyways, I don't need to get into Spanish Civil War history, but yeah, Sabicas was like America's favorite, the most famous, the biggest flamenco guitar player, and that's kind of the guy we take our lineage from. And so I'm take it away. Punta y Tapon. Let's take one of the headphones out. There we go. Sorry, I got too into it. Was it still being heard with the headphones falling off? Sorry, you guys still there?
Yeah, still hear you. Yeah, all good.
Sorry,
Yeah,
wasn't make sure.
great.
The headphones fell off. I got too into it. Anyways.
Passion.
Yeah, I know.
I couldn't keep up with your fingers there. It was just this blur on the screen.
We want that to happen in flamenco. That's called the rasqueado. If you can move faster than a 24th of a second, that's how you want it to be.
Is that right?
That's a camera frame, yeah.
The incredible music, just so many delicate individual notes that each of them gets their little moment in the sun and then has to fade into the background because the next one has to come. It's just a beautiful up and down. I mean, I've no musical training at all to be able to analyze it, except to say I smile when I hear a master at his craft.
I appreciate that very much. Namaste. Yeah, and I mean, that's just like, that's how it makes me feel to play it too. And I'll be honest, it takes, I do this in the traditional way, where in Spain, what would happen is you'd have like a master, like a Kung Fu master or something. You go once a week and you'd say, okay, did you practice? Here's what I want you to learn for this week. Come back and play that perfectly next week. Mm. And so it's taken me 2 years of learning this much at a time of that song.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
And it's like I read the music and everything.
Yeah.
But to actually play it, reading music as a guitarist is very difficult. But
it feels like the perfect music actually to have on the lock-in. Like we traditionally have just traditional Irish music, but it's a bit like I'm seeing the comparisons here with Irish whiskey. You know, Irish whiskey has a wonderful connection with Spain and with sherry, and here we have this wonderful Spanish music, Iberian music on the Irish whiskey lock-in. It's a natural collaboration.
Well, I got to say too that on my maternal grandmother's side, that family are all Costellos from Cork, and Costello is Castillo. Is taken from Spanish.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought, it was a little bit fitting, and I'm a history major too. I'm at University of Redlands out here finishing up my bachelor's. So that's one of the vectors for this whole classical guitar and flamenco. Is that there's a huge, really interesting history component, since flamenco is the music of the gypsies.
Yes.
And if you want to understand the music of the gypsies, you have to actually trace the lineage of each musical tradition they adopted and incorporated along the way. So you have to go from Spanish all the way down through Egypt, through the Middle East, through Persia, and into India, and learn Indian music if you want to know flamenco properly. Mm. So like my maestro was teaching me John McLaughlin and something, Shakti, Mahavishnu Orchestra and stuff. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's fascinating when you look at the history and the movement of people throughout Europe and then ultimately to the United States, and how music is influenced and how music influences cultures and countries over the years, and the crossover and how you can trace blues and rock back way further back to Europe, and it's incredible that it's quite incestuous, but in the best way, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, so much folk music traditions coalesced and became kind of one thing in America, and then African music, the rhythms of African music, made it into the 2 and the 4 of rock and roll and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, we can go all night on music theory, but it's not fun for the audience.
But we have some people in the audience many people in the audience giving many claps and cheers and kudos for that wonderful, beautiful tune, and also people are almost feeling like, are one of those electric guitars going to make it out at all? Do we think?
You can't see it right now, but there's a big pedal board full of effects and stuff, and a MIDI amp switcher and a 100-watt amp right behind the camera too. So, I don't know how loud I want to get it for an iPhone camera, but but it's gonna happen, and I've got drum beats and stuff set up too, and all that.
Oh, really?
If you want to go like experimental. I'll make like an acid jam or something. We'll go, real Dublin underground, 1992 Dublin or something.
Oh, listen, we're here for the night. We're here for the night.
Right.
We're not going anywhere.
All right, you asked for it.
Well, look, I let you think about that, and look, there's no limits here to our imaginations, and whatever you want to play for us. You're the maestro. We're only the adoring crowd. So I let you have a think.
I haven't given you the real double barrel flamenco yet, so
Well, the word in the street is crank it to 11. So that's all you need to know.
Can I ask Mark a question?
Yeah, let's bring Mark back in, and he'll jump to attention there now. Look, here he comes.
Busy pouring, lads. Busy pouring.
Tasty's got a question for you, Mark.
Go for it.
So I had been reading that the 2008 Causeway Bushmills, they made far fewer bottles than the 2005. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the 2008 was about 1,400, I think 1,454 bottles. The 1985 was 2,500 bottles. Now, I reckon they're probably filling the same amount of casks roughly each time, but Malaga casks are generally come in butts. So a Malaga butt would be about 500 litres. If not larger, so 500 to 600 liters. Where a Moscatel barrel or a traditional wine barrel, you're talking 225 to 250 liters. So if you fill 5 Moscatel barrels and you fill 5 Malaga barrels, you're going to get more bottles out of the Malaga.
You get 1,000 extra bottles, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the reasoning behind it. Now, I asked when we were on the press launch for that those whiskies, I asked Mulholland, who is the master blender for Bushmills, a question, and I thought it was a pretty good question. It was all these Causeway collections, and I think the rare cask releases that they're going to do are all casks that have been vatted with single malt that is solely aged in bourbon and solely aged in sherry, then vatted into these unique barrels. And I asked her, is it just a standard vatting that goes into these barrels? Like, is it just is it a 50-50 or is it a 60-40 or what is it? And she said, absolutely not. It is unique to the cask that they're putting it into. So depending on the notes that they're trying to bring out, they're trying to make it more tropical, or they're trying to make it richer or darker. So if they're trying to make it more tropical, they might lean a little bit more in the bourbon cask and let the wine influence come in and turn those kind of apple and orchard fruits into more kind of white and stone fruits. But if they're trying to make it richer, they're obviously going to lean heavier on the sherry elements and really allow that to come through. But she says that it's most certainly unique to the barrel, and she was actually very proud of the 1995 cask because she's been working for Bushmills for I think over 20 years. But when she really stepped into her own as part of the blending team, was about kind of 15-16 years ago. So she would have been filling, like those Malaga casks would have been filled under her watch, and they're now being released. So I think it's a pretty incredible moment for her in her career to see these whiskies coming through.
And interestingly, herself, Helen Mulholland, and Billy Layton would have worked together, who's the master blender for Middleton. They would have worked together on the blending panel for Bushmills before Billy moved to Irish Distillers full time. So, the two top blenders in the Irish whiskey industry were part of the same team for a long, long time.
Cool. Thank you. That was a great answer.
The world of Irish whiskey is so small when you realize how many people have worked together, and today now with so many distilleries popping up, I think we're going to hit 35 this week. There'll be another, we're 34 at the moment, there'll be a 35th this week. People have come from other distilleries and are now in distilleries like, for example, you take you take the Powerscourt Distillery, where the master distiller has come from the Cooley Distillery, and he is sourcing his own liquid to release prior to his Powerscourt whiskey maturing. You realize that Irish whiskey was so small in the 80s and 90s that there were only a handful of blenders and distillers at the time, and so we're very lucky that they're still around to be able to kind of share their knowledge to new distilleries.
I would be fairly staunch on the fact that I really don't think there's many masters in Ireland and many people that actually deserve that phrase to be associated with them. Noel Sweeney is certainly one of them. He's done his time. He is a master distiller, master blender, aficionado, one of the most awarded distillers in Ireland, and he's now with the Powerscourt Distillery, which I'm sure will be amazing things, and an absolute gentleman as well at that. Billy Layton, arguably the best blender in the world. I'm just going to throw that out there. Helen Mulholland, she's done her time, absolutely fantastic blender. Barry Crockett obviously is the master distiller emeritus. He is the man that nobody will ever question. But I am absolutely delighted for Kevin O'Gorman as well, because him taking that master distiller reign, it's undoubtedly deserved. He started off as a distiller, worked through all the different regions of production throughout Middleton for the last 20 odd years. Absolutely well deserved there as well. Brian Nation obviously is moving on and moving to the US, but it's a very, very small barrel of people in Ireland that have been in the industry long enough to attain those titles.
That's fair.
But yeah, it's fair play to them. I don't know, maybe it's something that many people can aspire to now and work their way towards that. I know, like, obviously, I do forget about Graham Cool, because Graham is a blow-in. But Graham Cool, as much of a blow-in as he is, he most certainly deserves that title as well. A man responsible for some absolutely incredible whiskies in the Scotch whisky industry. A man responsible for production in some of the biggest distilleries in Scotland in terms of the brand equity, but now master distiller of Dingle, and he most certainly deserves that title as well. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but it's a small pool.
It's nice to see people like Graham coming in. Last time a Scotsman came into Ireland to teach the Irish how to make whiskey, we got John Jameson, and then the rest is history. So we're happy enough with that. And so, yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that Waterford Distillery, one of the most talked about distilleries at the moment, are very, very clear that their distiller, Ned, and he says himself, he's not a master distiller, he's the head distiller.
Yeah. He's the head distiller. Yeah, I love that. I think that's fantastic. And he's clearly an excellent distiller. Comes from a beer background, obviously, with the old brewery that was there. But like that's the way to do it. You're only as good as your last day out, if you put it. He's definitely doing it the right way. And in 10 years time, they'll have 10-year-old spirit, and I don't think anybody will be ever questioning his skills. He'll be the master then.
So as Casey thinks about amps and drum and bass kits and all kinds of electronics he's figuring out for the next tune, Mark, you've threatened us with a third tune, despite only promising us 2 tunes. You're now going to go to a third, whether we like it or not.
Well, I fucking sorry for cursing. Jeez, I forgot I said that. What do you call it? Kissy requested
earlier yesterday by the Beatles. But I'll tell you what, I'll play you one more tune by the Beatles, and it's my favorite Beatles song, and it has been for a very, very long time. And it's a nice, short and kind of quick one. But it's certainly, I'm very sensitive to the whole mental health aspect of this COVID and how it can affect a lot of people. And the song is about it's about lonely people. So we'll give it a blast here. So. Look at all the lonely people. Look at all the lonely people. Ellen Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. She lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for, all the lonely people? Where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? Father Mackenzie, writing the words to a sermon that no one will hear. No one comes near, look at him working, donning his socks in the night when there's nobody there. Nobody cares, all the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? Look at all the lonely people. Look at all the lonely people. Eleanor Rigby died in a church and was buried along with the name. Nobody came, Father Mackenzie, wiping the dirt from his hands as he walks from the grave. No one was saved, all the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong?
Wow. Beautiful.
Perfect.
Good man, Mark.
Beautiful.
Good man.
Cheers.
I love it.
Really beautiful.
You know, I have the best fun on a Friday night. I just sit back and sip whiskey and let everybody else do the hard work, play great tunes and share whiskey knowledge, and nobody will know that I know nothing about whiskey and nothing about music because I bring on the best guests. Fair play to you.
That's such a great Paul McCartney song too.
Yeah.
It's so much darker than he would normally do.
Yeah. Great
John, I told him I wrote a song about like a sad lady.
I like that.
That's my Paul. Well, I don't know about that, Paul. I don't think people are like that.
I've only one impression is to do a whiskey, and it's a Scotch whiskey blender, probably one of the most famous blenders in the world. A guy called Richard Patterson. Yeah. But he's known as the Nose, and when he does his tasting and he introduces people to tasting, he says, you should build a relationship with your whiskey, and you nose it 2 or 3 times, and you, hello, how are you? I'm good, thanks.
Oh, that's great.
Richard Patterson meets Sean Connery in the Dark Hallway there.
It's sexier. It's sexier with the twang of Donegal, you know.
What you missed out on there was you didn't throw your whiskey across the room.
No, exactly.
We tasty.
Mark,
Any more whiskey questions? I'm conscious we're on 2 hours here.
There is another one came in here, which is why is so much Irish whiskey released at 40%? And there's many answers to that, but Mark, give us your perspective on that.
I suppose 40% is I suppose was the traditional percentage for a long time. It's the minimum percentage, so you can't go any lower. And also a big factor for a lot of the not the newer brands, but especially in Ireland, is duty. The higher your ABV, the more duty you're going to pay. And like the duty on a bottle of whiskey at 40% is, I think, $12.75 at the minute. So it's a lot of euros on top of your cost before it hits the shelf. So if you take a bottle of whiskey, like Powers is on sale at the minute for €20, $12.75 of that is actually duty. So the cost price there, or the selling price ex duty, is less than a tenner. You know, it's about €7. So it's crazy what duty does to actually the cost. But I'm a firm believer in. I suppose 40% was the norm, you know, through the 60s, 70s, the 70s, 80s, kind of 90s. 40% very much was the norm. 46 became the norm for certain brands because of a thing called flock haze. So when you're bottling your product and you're deciding, you know, the balance of the final product, you take into account dilution. And you know, the blenders are nosing and tasting their components at cask strength generally, and they're cutting them down with filtered water to try and get as accurate an idea as they can as they go along. But when you go below 46% on a cask unfiltered whiskey, between 44, 43, 42, you'll start to see that the long chain and fatty acids start to clump together, and they create a cloudiness in the whiskey, which is known as flock haze. And that cloudiness, to counteract that, was the reason why chill filtration was created. So chill filtration essentially is a process before bottling where they chill the whiskey down so that those fatty acids and long chain esters actually clump together. Then they push the whiskey through the filter, and those fatty acids and esters are pulled away. But you know, you're taking a tiny element of flavor away there, but it's generally the fattier acids that actually clump together are probably the less desirable ones anyway, and the less contributory ones. So it's not taking much away, but it takes a little bit away from the whiskey itself. Yep. But if you're going to bottle at 40, then that's something that you almost have to do. And that's become the norm for a long time. And most whiskies that we see on the shelves now are chill filtered. But if you take a very, very close look at Powers Gold label there, it's bottled at 40%, and it is not chill filtered, and there's no haze in there. So Irish distillers have figured out a way of bottling their whiskies below 46, 43% and not chill filtering them and not having that haze in there. But I've certainly seen bottlings down through the years. When Napoe Castle did their first ever single casks, they did them with the Celtic Whisky Shop in Dublin. Celtic Whisky Shop provided 2 wine barrels, and 12-year-old Napoe Castle went into those wine barrels and it was bottled. But both of those casks had considerable flock haze, and they were bottled at 46%, considerable flock haze, and it turned a lot of people off. At the end of the day, it doesn't actually affect the whiskey at all. It's definitely not a bad thing. You can drink through it. But some people turned it off. There was actually a full bottling batch of Writer's Tears was recalled before for flock haze. So you're talking about, I'd say bottling of Writer's Tears is probably about 8,000 bottles was recalled for flock haze. And it's a crazy thing, but that's how chill filtration came about and why bottling at 40% is so popular. But now for bottling at 40%, I think, to get back to the main question, there was a kind of not a debate going on in the comments earlier about, say, Bushmills 21 being bottled at 40%. I truly believe that some whiskies are perfect at 40%. I think they don't need any more ABV. I think 40%, like, that's a lot of alcohol when you consider things.
and you're carrying an awful lot of flavor in there when you break down the chemical components of the whiskey itself. Now, triple distillation, because triple distillation refines the liquid so much, makes those flavor carrying compounds so much more delicate. Where if you compare a whiskey, a double distilled whiskey at 40% to a triple distilled whiskey at 40%, they're very, very different animals. But at the same time, you know, trained palates can tell these things apart. But for the general consumer, you know, they're looking for something that's smooth. And now a lot of people hate the word smooth, but they're looking for something that's smooth, something that actually, you know, brings through a lot of you know, the softer elements of flavor, and something that they can consistently go back to.
Yes.
And I think that's something that's one of the major reasons why 40% is so popular. Because if you create really, really high quality whiskey, you know, it's blended really, really well, you're using really high quality cask, you can create a whiskey that is so easy and so delicate and so easy to drink at that percentage that why would you do it any other way? But also, you take whiskies like Bushmills 16, Bushmills 21, you can create whiskies, fucking Jameson have incredible whiskies at 40% over the years. You can create whiskies that are just outstanding at 40% as well. There's no reason why this should be wrote off. And anybody that says to me that they think Bushmills 21 would be much, much better at even 43, like, I don't know how good your palate is, but if you think you can tell that much difference in a whiskey because of 3% ABV, you have a better palate than I do. And I drink whiskey for a living.
We get our powers in the US at 43%, 43.6%, whereas, and it's very tough to tell the difference. You get it here at 40%. It's called the Distiller's Cut over here. I see powder release that in the UK, which is what we've had in the US for quite a while. But yeah, it's. I would also add in there that the elephant in the room, of course, is that if the legal requirement for whiskey minimum alcohol by volume is 40%, well, the chief financial officer will have a big say in trying to ensure that they'll reduce the duty payable by trying to let's call it what it is and try and bring it down. It doesn't take away from the quality of the whiskey, but look, if you can get a quality whiskey and get it at 40%, that's obviously the goal for the big brands.
I see two questions in there. I see Steve Smathers, which what causes the haze that you sometimes get in your glass from some whiskies. I'd say that's just the oilier and fattier elements of the whiskey clinging to the glass. And also, if your glass has been washed in a generic dishwasher, or it's been washed with detergent, it's been washed in any way or kind with fairy liquid or anything like that, it's going certain greases, for lack of a better word, are going to cling to that glass, and those greases then the fattier elements of whatever liquid you put in there are going to cling to that grease. A really good way of checking your glasses is actually to fill them with water and then empty them out. It's like a splash test essentially. But if the water kind of separates at any point as it's flowing out, and you're going to see like little windows along the glass where the water's going around, then that's your greases clinging to the glass. Once they're there, it's very, very hard to get rid of them. There's another question in there about the Lustau higher percentage. So there was a Lustau cask strength, Redbreast Lustau cask strength that was given out to a lot of bartenders and bar managers across Ireland as a kind of little treat to try something new. Are they going to come out with it as a regular release? I have absolutely no idea. I haven't asked the question. I do have a sample of it. I have tried it. I'm undecided on whether I think it's amazing or not. There's certain elements of flavor in there that are fantastic. You'd expect nothing less from Redbreast, but I haven't spent enough time with it to really go into detail on it just yet. But if they do release it, there's no doubt that it will be well received. There's plenty of people out there looking for cask red whiskies.
Lots of interest in Redbreast Lustau. One of my favorites of the Redbreast lineup, and the only non-age statement in the range, but one of my favorites from a flavor profile. I can't beat Redbreast Lustau. Let's go back to Casey. Casey, you're looking very comfortable there in a king's throne, surrounded by guitars. What are you sipping on yourself now at the moment? Oh, he's on mute. Let me unmute Casey. There he is.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
All right. I'm still sipping on the Dargaelic. I put one drop of water in there. I was going to try to drink it straight, and I was like, it's just too much fun to add a drop, you know. And I was just wondering, I kept thinking about this while Mark was talking. I had the question of my own. maybe so Splash Test Dummies. I think that should be our band name.
Splash Test. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've just been, you know, Cask kind of gets you a little bit more reclined, I think. But I also was thinking about something, since this would just be too much fun to not share with everybody.
Here we go.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring a rarity off. This is something that you will never find in a store or on eBay or anything like that. I think there's only 50 something of these made. The number is in the neck socket, but this is what was called a kiddie caster. And so from 1990 through 1995, our company made Eddie Van Halen's signature model. And along the way, for whatever reason, and I have no idea why, but Honda Shokai, who are the #1 music retailer in Japan, came to us with a couple of these prototypes. And they said, we're going to have a built-in amplifier in the guitar. And there's a speaker you can take out and service back here. There's all kinds of funny stuff. It's powered with a 9-volt battery, but the idea was that, oh, battery's dead. Let's put it through the amp. But the idea was that it'd be for little kids, and it'd be an Eddie Van Halen model, or like a Wolfgang probably at the time. And yeah, it was just this tiny little thing that's just too much fun. Let's see. Gonna take the amp off standby, but you know, I figured it's a little timely since you know, Van Halen just recently passed away.
I know, R.I.P. And Eddie Van Halen, known for some of his collaborations too with Irishman Glenn Hansard.
Let's see. I hope that doesn't start to feed back and go nuts on us. Nope, I don't think it's working. Anyways,
it's
out of juice. It needs new
colorful, the guitars on the shelf up there on the wall.
But I thought, yeah, that'd be a little fun to explore some of these. Anyways, but
I bet every one of these guitars has a story attached to it.
They'll have a story, and they're all going to get a sip as well, I think.
Boom. Have you now worked your way through all of your sips, or have you got? You didn't try the Barry Crockett yet, did you?
Not yet. Let's go. Let's get there.
Well, why don't you have a quick sip of the Barry Crockett, and then maybe you'll give us a tune.
I'm ready to give you a tune now if you'd like.
Let's do it. We're all ears.
All right.
We got nowhere to go. We're in lockdown in Ireland.
I'm gonna cut it off there. I'll get too crazy on it. But
That's beautiful. That 1/24th of a second is in my mind as I watch you, and it's you've got such a love clearly for Iberian flamenco, that's peninsula-inspired music, don't you?
yeah, well, I think that definitely drew me to all the sherry cask influence and all that Madeira, Malaga, and all that kind of stuff too. And it's funny because I actually chose Ireland over Spain to go to for my first like non-real world trip. You know what I mean? Like a not just Hawaii or Mexico or somewhere. The U.S. So, and also I was able to play a gig there in Ireland. Not that I had planned it, or not that I had gotten booked, or anybody knew who I was, but I was at the Park Distillers Resort in Sneem.
Yes. Yeah.
And this guy, Vincent Highland, who is at Wild Dairyman on Instagram, a really genius nature photographer, he was like the bar musician I saw there, and he had me sit in. So, everybody in Ireland was always like, yeah, come play. And I kind of stumbled through some like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but then I played some flamenco, and everybody was happy.
That's amazing. Derrynan, interesting whiskey connection with Derrynan. Derrynan is the home of Daniel O'Connell, famed Irish liberator, the man who helped Catholics achieve emancipation from the British, and it is his descendant Maurice O'Connell, who is now the founder of Wayward Irish Spirits, who has released a whiskey called the Liberator, and has some lovely blends and malts from that are of a lovely port contribution to them. And so the Derrynan connection there is strong with whiskey, and it was with bootlegging too back in the day.
Ooh, very cool.
Let us bring back in Mark, who is furiously responding to hundreds of questions coming in about whiskey. We have reached almost the end of the whiskies that we've lined up. It by no means means that we have to go anywhere, but where do we go from here? What's the consensus?
Oh, I'm soon for the bed anyway, lads. One thing I will say though, Casey, geez, that just phenomenal playing.
Oh,
absolutely
so
fantastic, and great to meet somebody from the Ball family. It's really really cool.
Well, like I said, I'm going to DM you, and I got to hook you up with some straps or strings or picks or something.
Yeah, cool. It'd be amazing, but really really incredible playing. I just the finger style was never something I was very very good at, but that was just phenomenal. Really really good. I'd love to see you whack out that Van Halen style guitar there sometime, but you can send me a video tomorrow or something. Would be cool.
I tell you what, once Barry puts me backstage, I'll switch the battery out. Don't worry. And then here's bottle kill number 3. There we go.
Amazing.
Good man.
The end of Barry Crockett's. We've now finished 3 Middleton bottles in one night. That's
any more questions on your list, Barry?
No, I think we've got to most of them at this stage. There was one question came in very late, which was why is Cork the greatest county? But we can ignore that one. It's probably not directly related to whiskey. We'll overlook that one. I don't know. Listen, Mark. You've again given us great knowledge, great insight into the world of whiskey. You've entertained us no end. Many talents. You'll have to focus on one of them now. You'll have to choose one and go down that path. There's no time for 2 of them.
8 months unemployed now. I think I might just stick at it.
Buster. The next Ed Sheeran over here.
There you go. Mark, tell us about Cask Strength Communications. So we didn't talk about it. Mark is of late doing a great job of reviewing whiskies in a long form way that I would maintain has been missing from the Irish whiskey scene. I wouldn't have the palate, the experience, the ability to review whiskies like people like Mark can, but he's filled a lovely gap there with his reviews. What is Cask Strength Communications, Mark, and what do you do there?
I suppose Cask Strength Communications is essentially a website, www.cask-strength.com. But with the COVID pandemic, I was working in the hospitality industry as a operations manager, so I was laid off relatively quickly, and having a lot of time on my hands, I thought maybe it'd be a good time to maybe start reviewing some whiskies and getting some more of my thoughts on the whiskey industry out there. Not necessarily just thoughts, but knowledge as well. There's very few writers out there that have worked directly within the industry in the same way that I have, as long as I have. Which is in Ireland in particular, which I felt was kind of a unique thing. So I've been working in hospitality in Ireland for 15 years, but I'm working directly within Irish whiskey for 8 now. So really, just as the boom was starting to take a little bit of into the next gear, Dingle just opening, I was right there in the center of it all. So I started doing some reviews. Kind of not necessarily a no holds bar approach, but in my career thus far, I've tasted probably, I don't know, it'd be 1,500, 2,000 spirits in general. I've tasted hundreds and hundreds of wines. I've a relatively good experience with tasting alcohol of all kinds, and my palate would be pretty good. So I thought, let's see, can we start putting some of this down on paper and giving little insights into brands that maybe is thinking in it a little bit differently to the general consumer would think. So I did a few long form reviews, which were great, and I did a few elements on bars and just a few insights on different things, which has led to me. I've been writing for a couple of reviews for Malt Review, which are the biggest whiskey review website in the world, which has been fantastic. I'm writing a couple of very long form pieces for Irish Whiskey Magazine as well. I'm actually currently working on a piece about brand ambassadors in the industry, what they're going through right now and their future for Malt Review, which will be my first feature piece for Malt, which we expect to see in the next month or two up there. And but also I decided I would put up consulting services on it. Because of my experience in the on-trade, the off-trade, and within brands, I thought I could add a lot of value to anybody that was looking for a little bit of help. So I've been fortunate enough to pick up a lot of work in consulting over the past couple of months with small distilleries, with bigger distilleries, with building, even with, I've actually done some work with the Irish Whiskey Association here in Ireland. Generally stuff on brand development, brand strategy, drinks development, cocktail development, putting their drinks in people's hands. I'm currently working on a project with a very small distillery in Ireland, again on their plans for the future. Look at everything from label design to launch strategy to what they've done in the past and breaking it down for them. So I'm getting a lot of work out of it. Well, not a lot of work, but enough to kind of keep the demons at bay. And hopefully in the near future something will come up more permanent that will keep me going. But it's been like very much like an online CV for me, and it's giving people an insight into my experiences in the Irish whiskey industry, which I think is pretty unique, because if you look at what I've achieved, not necessarily what I've achieved, but what I've experienced in the last 10 years, there's not many people my age that have had similar goings in the Irish whiskey industry, which is great. And it's also led me to, being on features like this with yourself, and getting to meet a lot of people in the industry that are making waves, and also trying to help them along their way as well. I think you'll back me up on this, Barry, that I'm very clear and concise with my advice. I don't hold back. I'll tell you what I think, and I'll tell you why I think it. And I think a lot of people are finding that quite refreshing at the minute, which is great.
I think we were in the, I think it was the Palace Bar. I think I met you for the first time maybe 2 years ago. I think it might have been the launch of, maybe it was the Palace Bar Redbreast, I think. And I was standing beside Sergios from Irish Whiskey Magazine, and I was new to this world of Irish whiskey, really, and then who was who in Irish whiskey, and I was just a chancer telling stories, and I just enjoyed the stories, and he pointed
Not anymore.
to... Yeah, I don't know, still the same. I just tell more elaborate stories now. Sergius pointed to you, Mark. He says, that fella knows a lot about whiskey. And I thought, okay, I should find out what's the story of this lad. And I think you might have been working with Paddy at the time. I think you were working with Paddy at the time. But yeah, Mark's got a great look. Ireland's a small country, but there's a trove of, well, there's a core group of people in the Irish whiskey industry that are doing incredible things, and I enjoy learning from them. People like Mark and Sergio, so Irish Whiskey Magazine, and just real people who have a passion, and you kind of I don't know, life is short. Kind of want to spend time around people that love what they do and focus and kind of go deep on their craft. Like I like people who go an inch wide and a mile deep, you know, and
I think we're in a not a lucky stage, but we're in a good stage in the industry right now where 5-6 years ago, the only people outside of brands that you could kind of converse with and talk to and find out more about whiskey was people like myself and guys like Stephen McGuinness and Emmett Murphy and James Scales, who all worked in places like that. We worked in the Celtic Whiskey Shop, and that was the only place where you could get kind of independent opinions about whiskey. But nowadays with the the wonder that is Twitter, even Instagram, Facebook, like look at the Irish Whiskey. You've near 6,000 members on the Facebook page now. It's much easier for people to access kind of independent information. But there's a lot of information that's out there that is heavily influenced by the people that are either paying for it or giving out the free samples or this, that, and the other. So I think there's still room for independent voices to come through. There's nobody there that does it, truly 100% without any kind of an agenda behind it. And I'm not saying I have an agenda, or say Phil or Omar or anybody has agendas. But there's definitely room for more and more people to come through and start, really exploring Irish whiskey. And if anybody, my big thing is if people are willing to, put into time to learn about Irish whiskey and the depths that I've had the opportunity to learn about, then let's get those voices out there. Let's talk about it. Let's spread the word, and let's have these healthy debates as well. It's
nice to see it. Like I think when I first started doing videos about Irish whiskey 2 years ago, there were no videos being made at the time, and I didn't know much about Irish whiskey except I had an interest, and I just started going deep into it. And now it's great to see YouTube channels popping up. There's tons of podcasts about Irish whiskey. It's great. You want more people, because it just kind of introduces more people to find. It's the rising tide gathers all boats, and I think that's a really good point, because the podcast side of the industry. I know I've spoken to you directly about this before, but I think the Stories and Such podcast is absolutely fantastic, because it's clear that you put in the research beforehand. You have a very direct line of questioning. It's interesting. It's informative. You're getting into the nitty gritty of people's brands, which is absolutely fantastic. And I would highly recommend listening to the Stories and Such podcast to anybody. Sergio's has been doing some good things with his Words on Whiskey, and they're kind of video chats, which are less formal. Well, it's not that they're less formal, that yours aren't formal, but they're kind of more chatty, and they're pretty good. Matty and Pot Still kind of started this off with his Pot Still Radio, but I think since then, people have really stepped up their game. Like, to be honest, the Stories and Such astonishing. Words on Whiskey is really, really good. Brian Hennessy is doing his YouTube videos the last couple of weeks, which they're very. It's he's got a great palate, but he's very much an amateur, and he's on a. It's not that he's trying to be he's not trying to tell anybody that he's this big whiskey guy. He's just a guy that loves whiskey. He's tasting whiskey and he's telling me about it, and it's fantastic. I really, really love those videos. That's the Whiskey Chaser. For anybody that doesn't know, he's doing these YouTube videos. They're fantastic. But the more of that type of stuff that starts to happen, Phil has his who's been watching all night tonight. He has his Causeway Coast whiskey reviews, and he's a heavy contributor to malt.
he's the most unapologetic in terms of he's not afraid to put his word out there, and people call him the grumpy one. But I don't think it's that he's the grumpy one. I think it's that he's the one that the poorer samples keep landing in front of. Which is fine. But the other side of the industry as well is the likes of, say, James Doherty there in Sleeve, Graham Cool in Dingle. Even you could argue Jerg Ireland and IDL. We have more people in the industry interacting with everybody than ever there was before. Chris Hennessy, he's a bartender consultant kind of guy. He doesn't work directly for any one brand, but he runs that Irish whiskey page and he does a great job. Dahi O'Connell that has WD O'Connell, Louise McGuan, they're all constantly online now.
But when you compare the Irish whiskey industry is nascent, it's young in its digital footprint, and I've spent the last 13, 14 years in the United States, and the bourbon industry has a massive, I wouldn't say influencer network, but rather a contributor network of YouTube channels, podcasts, webcasts, articles. Irish whiskey is starting to kind of follow that. Scotch whiskey industry has had that as well for quite a while. So I'm excited to see new entrants in who have a passion, who want to share honestly, authentically. I'll say this, it's like any aspect of Irish life. It's a cruel world if you're a chancer and you're not willing to put in your time, and you feel like you know it all, and you act like you know it all. The Irish whiskey world will be unashamedly gunning for you. But if you go in there and say, look, I'm interested, I'm curious, and I want to know, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants that have gone before us and people who know so much more than all of us. I always say, and I'll say it every time, I know 1/10 of 100% of what the rest of you know. And I'm just here to learn. And if we can share stories along the way, more power to all of us. And sure, look, have a bit of crack along the way is all it's about.
That's great. Well, I'm gonna say just one last thing, and then I'm gonna knock off. But I want to thank Barry and I want to thank Casey both for having me on again tonight and enjoying the crack.
Cheers,
I have to commend you, Barry, for keeping this lock-in going the way it is, and for everything that you've done with stories and such. It's been fantastic so far, and I'm proud, and I mean that. I'm very proud to have played a very small part in it over the last couple of months, and continue to do so. It was great crack, playing a few songs, etc., and really nice enjoying the whiskies. I'm going to head bed, and I wish you all a good night.
Thanks a million for your contribution. We'll chat to you.
One last thing in before we go, if that's okay.
Casey, it's just you and me, buddy.
Okay. I just wanted to tell him that, he had mentioned working for Celtic Whiskey Bar, and I just wanted to say that that's like the one thing that really turned me. The one place was Celtic Whiskey Bar in Killarney. Because I had gone there for like a wine, whiskey and cheese tasting with my wife, and, I was already knew that I liked Irish whiskey, but, my wife had said, like, I'm not gonna try any until we get there. She never had any whiskeys, any drinks, or anything like that before. Just margaritas, really.
It's a great spot. When the world opens up again, and we're all able to travel, and Americans are able to get to Ireland, the Celtic Whiskey Bar in Killarney is a remarkable place. Amazing selection of whiskies, amazing classes and tutorials. Stunning.
And their Kildare cask that they have, or Killarney. I don't know how to pronounce.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
actually pronounced pretty much the same, Killarney.
Right.
Irish. But yeah, they have their own cask. Actually, it's the Celtic Whiskey Shop, the Celtic Whiskey Bar. They spearheaded the retail movement on whiskey in Ireland, and Ali McAlpine is the founder, a Scotsman who came into Ireland and started this wine and whiskey shop in Dublin, and then expanded ultimately to Killarney with the Celtic Whiskey Bar. He's the unsung hero behind the scenes of so much. He's responsible for Whiskey Live in Dublin. He's responsible for a lot of charity work with Down syndrome in Ireland as well, and a remarkable character. I want to get him on the podcast if he's willing to one of the weeks to have a chat, because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was nobody doing anything in the Irish whiskey world from a retail standpoint, and Ali came in and kind of took a bit of a gamble, took a bit of a risk there. So we'll chat to Ali hopefully in the future and learn more about that early formation of his what has now become a whiskey empire, really.
Well, I thought too, just like the overall cultivation of the experience was genius. Like, it was really inspired, the whole thing, from the moment you walk in the door. And,
Yeah, it's good.
every other thing you just listed that I had no idea about, I was like, yeah, all those things have the same level of cachet.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. No, it's Ireland's small. Like it's funny. I'm back here now. We're back here 8-9 days, and I'm talking to so many people on the phone every day here in Ireland, and you start to realize who's connected to who, and you're reminded of who's related to who, and who used to work here and work there. It is like one big parish. It's a small. Ireland is a small town in America. And
I was thinking too. You've been in Ohio and San Diego a little bit, back and forth, and it's like, nobody in California knows anybody. You can't go between towns or anything like that. It just doesn't happen. You just know, you just share freeways. That's it.
I know.
Not communities.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So
tell me this: Did you manage to get the amp connected up to the guitar at all?
Well, yeah. So I took a look at the inside of this real quick, and the cool thing about this is that the idea was that it'd be a guitar that has its own amplifier.
Wow.
There you go. So you'd have a clean sound, which doesn't work right now, but then you'd also have like a distortion built in to sound like Van Halen. But it of course doesn't quite sound right through just the guitar speaker. So let's see what we can do through here. I hope that didn't kill everybody's ears. I'm trying not to do that, but sorry if that did exactly that.
No, it's great. That's great. I recognize that your two biggest fans in your room tonight are a dog and a cat.
It's true. We've got 4 cats and we've got one 100-pound dog. So
The menagerie.
Yeah. Here, let's see if this is actually. Regardless, let me bring out something cool for you. I gotta show you something that's got a story behind it. Right here.
All right, tell me.
This is a very special guitar, especially for me. This is custom made for me. The design and everything like that had already been around, but the paint job, the way it looks and everything, and the woods they used were my call, as well as the pickups and the way it was laid out and all that.
Wow.
So this is actually something made for a guy called Albert Lee, who's a very famous British country and Western guitar player, and if you can believe that. But he's actually the greatest there ever was. And so this is kind of his guitar. Let's see if I can actually turn it down a little bit. That's a little loud. Is that a little better, I think?
That sounds good.
All right. So that's like country western in space right there.
The color, that design is stunning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that was a really special choice. I called in. I think they only had like a half a can of this particular kind of paint left because it's a very fine, very small sparkle sort of thing.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And then the neck on this is a very fine cut of bird's eye maple, and I bought the custom pickup covers and all this kind of stuff. I don't want to get too deep into that because it's very nerdy and it's very niche.
No, this is I love nerdiness.
All right, cool.
So, look, a lock-in is about having the crack. It's about, we don't want to be too academic and whiskey or anything like that. I want to get to know people in a lock-in, and like I'm fascinated by interesting people. And you've turned up here with, let's be honest, maybe the most interesting backdrop of any guest we've ever had. And you're coming from obviously a lineage, a family background of music and songwriting and composing. For those of our listeners who are just tuned in, help us understand this company, this business, and kind of this family business.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I grab a packet of strings as a prop to show everybody, and button up my shirt because that popped out. Right here, if you've ever seen something like this, these pink strings, the black font, that's our company. That's what we're really, really known for, and how we really have always stood out at the register against competitors, is having a bright day glow with strong black contrast, sort of packaged strings. But more importantly than that, the whole story of how the business came about is that my grandfather, Ernie Ball, he had started the world's very first electric guitar business, the very first store that exclusively sold electric guitars. And this is in the late 50s in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. So he happened to be very close to, so I'm going to put this amp on standby, it's putting some noise out. He was right next to all the big studios. At the time, Studio City, if you've ever been to LA, because there used to be, so they made everything. So, and that's right next to the valley. So he was in Tarzana, and at the time when surf music was getting really big in the very late 50s, early 60s, as well as rock and roll and Chuck Berry and all that kind of stuff, all these guitar players started to say, hey, we want to bend these strings. We want to be able to rock out and do this whole like, sorry, you can't hear it. Let me plug it in. Sorry. Well, anyways, but bending strings, that was the idea. And he went to both Fender as well as Gibson, the only two guitar companies at the time, except for maybe a few cockamamie things like Tesco or something. And he had said, like, look, this is what the players want, and there's a gap in the market, and I want to serve it. And I want to make like custom gauge strings, and without getting too granular, this string right here, the G string, get your laughs out now. It used to be wound like these lower bass strings, but it was just too tough to bend. It was too tough to play. It would chew up your fingers, all kinds of stuff like that. So he said, look, I'll take a banjo string, which is the same diameter, the same thickness. If you put it under a micrometer, it pinches in at 0.009. Or in the case of a G string, it would be 16 gauge, which would be 0.016 of 1 inch. And from there on, he was like, well, if we grade all these strings by a specific gauge, and we let people choose how they want them to be, then we also pick the most popular ones, package those in a flashy, inviting sort of packaging. Boom, there we get a string amplifier. So what had happened is that both Fender and Gibson said, no, we don't think this is a viable idea. And so he said, look, I'm gonna bet on put it all on black, and he went into business for himself. And so he went broke 3 times, as the story goes. He went bankrupt completely, and just said, I'm not giving up, and bounced back. And then here I am in this beautiful guitar book.
That's incredible.
58 years later.
I mean, the names you're dropping there, and you're not dropping them for any other reason other than historical significance. Gibson, and I mean, like, these are the names you're sharing are
right. Like, okay, I'm going to give you one more story real quick to help illustrate.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but
the stories.
Yeah. So there's this thing called the NAMM, N-A-M-M show, and that's basically like Comic-Con for guitar. And so some years ago, we had our 50th anniversary, and we had a big expo kind of thing for it there. We had a big concert. And we had several really famous players, but the one that really struck me the most was Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
The Yardbirds. I don't need to explain it, but he was just talking about like, I was like a young punk kid. I was a studio musician because he was like playing for everybody on the radio before he was in a band. And he was like, I came to LA on a gig and I heard about this Ernie Ball guy. I stopped by his shop. I had been putting banjo strings on my guitar already. And this is the only guy who understood what guitar players wanted. And I got to give you a little background too on my grandfather, Ernie. So he was born in Rancho Santa Monica, which is like the country way far back in Santa Monica. We all know where Santa Monica is, but so Ern was born in Rancho Santa Monica and lived in LA his whole life, and went into the Air Force band because they have like bands in the military, and he was playing the steel guitar, and that was like his job, to play the steel guitar and the bass drum for the bands. And when he got out, he had all this GI Bill money and put that into his business, and also got married and all kinds of, that Ozzy and Harriet type stuff. So, that's kind of like a couple years later, Jimmy Page comes along and runs into this guy who's like also a studio country and western slide guitar player. And so that's kind of the thing that was the edge the business had, was being on the ground floor and being a musician and understanding what other musicians needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so it's like my dad, he started working at 9 years old at the register. And that's the family business thing, it's like, don't go play, you gotta come in and you gotta work. And so from that point, my dad was always meeting guys like, like the Byrds or Brian Wilson or from the Beach Boys, and all these kinds of people. And so, he had really taken over and really built it up. And my dad.
Do you do you work in the business now yourself?
My middle brother Brian is the he's the president. He's a big dog, the CEO, vice president. And my middle brother, few too much Cask ring.
Oh, that's all right. We're all in the same boat.
Okay. Oldest brother, vice president. Middle brother, president. Okay, that's CEO, I think. Yeah. And I've worked in the business a lot through most of my early to mid 20s. I actually have been going to school, and then I was bartending, and then I was working for a barbecue business my dad started, of all things. So I was selling barbecues and rubs and stuff, and then also gigging, playing classical guitar, and supporting myself by doing gigs at like the Hilton and things like that. I would go to board member meetings because they were like, oh, these are like the real high rollers of like the boardroom, and they like to have like a really fancy atmosphere. And I was like, okay, perfect. So I'd be playing all that stuff like, I don't know if you can hear that. But so that was what I was supporting myself doing for a while. And then I went to work for the family biz. And I worked first for a barbecue company. And I made a left turn and started learning how to do engineering and working in a machine shop and learning how to understand CNC machines and lathes and all kinds of heavy industrial equipment, as well as CAD designing.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So then I worked there for a little while, and then I was on dialysis for a while. I was really sick. And I was working at the same time. I had switched my job so that I could do something from home. And I was writing a lot of really technical blog articles about guitar, about how to like set up a guitar so you have a floating tailpiece like this. I don't know if you can see it clamp, but or like why you want string gauges, or how you set up a pedal board, all that kind of stuff. And then I went back to school, and that's where I still am right now.
What are you studying in school now? What's you're going for a degree?
Yeah, history. I'm finishing my bachelor's, which like pretty low level, but I went to if I had been going to school, just kind of went to work though instead of finishing like so many other people.
Is there a specific focus of the history degree?
Yeah, actually, right now I'm writing a really big research capstone paper about the Mongols.
Interesting.
And my thing that I'm really into, like this is my big study thing, is this guy called Subutai, who was Genghis Khan. I'm sure you know this Mongol guy. His like greatest general that actually had done all the work for him, and was not part of the historic record really. So I want to write a book about this, you know.
Where does like I've not. It's 15 years since I was in college, or longer, 22 years since I was in college, and back then it was kind of pre-internet almost. It was just internet, but it was mostly your research was done in books. And like today, where's your source material coming from, and where can you trust online that you're able to rely on information to help you with kind of capstone projects?
I buy used books from eBay. And I also get a lot of stuff from professors. But the used book market has exploded in the last 20 years with Amazon and eBay taking over that kind of thing. So it's like, I gotta show you. I have a stack of like 20 books here at my desk that I'm writing. And so well, there's a library from school. This is uncovered, but I don't know if you've ever heard of the author James Clavell, who wrote Shogun and Taipan and all that kind of stuff. He did a translation of The Art of War that I got from the library. Got this used. I'm not going to go through all of them, but so that's the way.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
Dusty tomes.
What are you going to? What's your hope by the end of this? What are you working towards?
I'm going to write a book and do TED Talks and stuff like that. And then like the big dream for real is like, I would love to make either like a history channel type of thing where you talk about various subjects or interesting people or times, but with a better budget and less corny scripts. And then like also the other big thing is to make some sort of big like HBO Game of Thrones level historic fiction drama kind of thing.
Well, you're clearly,
you know, that's aiming way high, way far down the road.
No, I mean you want to think big and dream as big as the sky, because no one else is going to dream that big for you. But you're clearly very inspired and driven by different cultures, and that shines through in the music. And obviously your work now with with Mongolia, and you know. You're not making it easy on yourself.
Farther away than Mongolia. I don't know.
You couldn't. No, you could not. Some of the nicest people I've ever met are from Mongolia. I went to school with some students from Mongolia, and some of the kindest, down to earth people I've ever met in my life.
And that's the funny thing too, is that like I'm a really corny, patriotic American guy too. You know, I'm Mr. Flag Waver. So
that's all right.
And it's like, let's go to Mongolia. Check it all out. This is awesome.
You're not a one-trick pony. You're not just a flag waver. You have diverse cultural interests, and that's always a good thing. We're about 3 hours in, and that's normally as long as we go. Diarmuid has acknowledged and recognized that the fire is dying a slow death behind me. Well, Diarmuid, you name me another Irish house that at 2:00 in the morning is getting the fire ready for another 2 hours of heat. Yeah, it won't be this one, I can assure you. It's dying a death on purpose. It's 2:00 in the morning. There'll be no more fuel put on that, I can assure you. Casey, you've been an incredible contributor, and I think we're only scratching the surface of getting to know you. But I think myself and the missus will have to take a drive one of the days and head your direction. And share a drink.
I was going to say too, we're not too far, and then I also have a cousin and her fiance that are nearby. You know, some kind of bar trip or something would be fun.
We should do that. We'll make that happen once the world becomes a little bit more friendly and open. We'll make that happen. But I want to thank you for coming on tonight. Thank you for your tunes, your music, your time, sharing with us your passion, which clearly shows, and you've had a great great reception from the audience here tonight. So sincere thanks for joining us. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you.
If you want me to play you off, I'll start playing something.
Let's do it.
Let's log off. Here, I got a beat I just made earlier today. Let me see.
Let's do this. Play us out. This man's a professional. He knows what he's doing.
Right. I hope.
Chris and Rebecca, Johnny,
Let's see.
thank you all for joining us. For those of you who are still hanging in with us, thanks so much for your time tonight. Rebecca and Johnny and Diarmid and Chris and Maureen. We've had another good night. We'll have many more of these to come. But right now, Casey Lee Ball is going to play us out with a tune.
All right. Slancherberry, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, my friend.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. I had a wonderful time. And thanks to Mark as well. What a great source of knowledge.
Indeed. Oh, there we go. The backing track.
All right.
Cavalry.
I got to take the standby. Damn. But just send it whenever.
You're good.
I'm
Johnny
just going to
said
keep noodling for forever. So.
Boom. Good man, Casey. That was your custom-made guitar. Casey Ball playing us out there with a tune. Good man, Casey. Thanks so much. We are at the end of our lock-in. It's been another great night. Great characters, great chat, live from West Cork, the last of our lock-ins from this particular location. Next week, I'll be moving location. I'm moving up to see my family in East Cork, in Cove, and I'll be coming to you from a very different location. But next week, we will have another musical guest. We'll have more great chat. We'll be talking whiskey. We'll be hanging out. We'll be having a good time together. And that's all that matters in these times of loneliness and isolation and, let's be honest, mental health challenges. We're facing into an unknown winter ahead, and who knows what's going to happen. But look, if there can be one consistent thing on our calendar, it's that we're going to meet here every Friday night and we're going to raise a glass. I've raised many glasses tonight, maybe too many, but I've enjoyed sipping on fantastic whiskey from Bushmills, from Powers, and from West Cork Distillers. We will do it again next week, all over again. I'm not going to belt out the Owl Triangle tonight because I've got I'm in an Airbnb that is partly occupied by somebody else, and so we're not going to wake them up with the Owl Triangle. I think we've had a lot of music tonight, and I'm sure you'll understand that. We're not going to wake up the entire neighborhood with our singing. Next week, I'll be in a location where I can sing to my heart's content, and so we'll sing out the Owl Triangle twice next week to make up for tonight. So, as always, all I'd ask of you is to like this live stream. If you're on Facebook, press the like button, share it on your profile, share it in any groups that you're part of, invite your friends to join us. We need our audience to keep growing every week so that we can bring on great guests and find more and more innovative and interesting and entertaining ways to keep ourselves excited and interested and distracted from the world around us on a Friday night. So all I would say is to all of you, Sláinte, thank you so much for joining me again tonight. I look forward to seeing you all in our Facebook group during the week. We've got a great podcast coming up again this week, which I'll release details of on Wednesday. But until next Friday, stay safe, wash your hands, give your loved ones a call and tell them you love them. And that's it. Sláinte. Good night.